It is a system of decisions, behaviors, controls, and accountability. And those controls must cover both the digital environments, the databases, applications, networks, cloud services, and even third parties, and also physical, the offline environment, which covers the paper records, files and systems, physical access, and all records that the organization has. Our theme this year, the DPO, that is the Data Protection Officer, as a strategic advisor, balancing compliance, risk, and business needs. It's this particular theme that we shall be deliberating on today, because the DPO function cannot remain within just the compliance desk, but it actually is one that has evolved over time. A modern DPO must be an early advisor in projects and procurements where personal data will be collected and processed. They must also be a translator of legal obligations into operational controls, and they must be a credible voice on risk to the leadership. They should also be a champion of practical safeguards that protect personal data without paralyzing service delivery. Especially in the compliance function, most people don't want to engage them because they think that they will turn down their projects. You shouldn't be that DPO that the organization will overlook or bypass. So make sure that you have the business practicalities in mind as you go about it. Globally, privacy programs are increasingly framed around risk management, the ability to identify and manage privacy risks while enabling innovation and service delivery. That approach aligns with what we need in Uganda, not just knowing the law, but operationalizing it, not even just at PDPO, but also within your organizations, and consistently, measurably, and realistically. What you should take away from today, by the end of the masterclass, you should be better equipped to apply Uganda's legal requirements to real organization decision making. You would also be able to prioritize actions based on risk and impact, and also communicate privacy risk in leadership language and supporting innovation and service delivery while safeguarding the rights. I encourage each of you throughout the sessions to keep asking a practical question. If this personal data were mine or my child's, would I be satisfied with how we are handling it? Because at the end of the day, you're dealing with data from which humans can be identified. That question brings back privacy, back to what it is really about, which is dignity, trust, and responsibility. Finally, let me remind each one of us that privacy is not only a technology or a legal issue, it's also a people issue, a process issue, and a physical security issue as well. So engage fully, learn more, share experiences from each other, because this is not just about the trainers and the people that will be on this platform, but also what you can be able to share with each of you. On behalf of PDPO, thank you for showing up, because your work turns the law into the legal protection of personal data for the citizens and the individuals. And I wish you a productive masterclass, and I look forward to the outcomes and commitments we take back into our organizations. Thank you, and you're welcome once again.
Thank you, Becca, for those remarks. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Becca Birikuja. Yes, I think the opening remarks were really insightful, and my takeaway is that as DPOs, there's need to protect personal data that we relate with within the different organizations. But while doing so, we need to also be mindful of the business operations and not paralyzing business because of those compliance obligations. Thank you so much for that. At this juncture, I will invite our partners from CIPESA to have the opening remarks as well, and then we'll be in position to delve into the masterclass. You're welcome, Edwin. Mr. Edwin Wanyama will be speaking to us next. Thank you. Let's welcome him, please, with a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Jordan, of the National Director, Personal Data Protection Office. Our invited guests, the different data protection officers of different institutions, agencies, organizations, companies, private sector, whichever name I hope is taken or covered therein. And the team from CIPESA, I want to say good morning to all of us. Good morning. Yes, you're very welcome to this masterclass where we're going to try as much as possible, as the National Director has emphasized, to score what we call the key duties, obligations, responsibilities, as well as the potential consequences associated with data protection and actually how it impacts on new people, the data protection officers. I am Edwin Wanyama, as they mentioned. I work with CIPESA. CIPESA doesn't stand for money, as most of you may know, picking from your Swahili dialect. CIPESA stands for Collaboration on International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa. I work with CIPESA as Programs Manager, Legal. As you may have looked at your programs, they're talking about remarks from the Executive Director. I am not the Executive Director, but I am standing probably in those shoes for now. So this CIPESA, which you thought represents CIPESA money, and the name of which I've given to you, CIPESA was started in 2004 under one of the British initiatives that were aimed at catalyzing access to information. And all this came in light of, while we're talking about access to information, but the internet was being increasingly recognized as a tool for enhancing universal access to information, yet it was hardly known. So that's how CIPESA got to be established. And CIPESA aims to contribute to progressive ICT policy on the continent. And CIPESA also aims to use ICT as an enabler for improving livelihoods across the continent. Because of that, CIPESA worked through different models or different ways. Amongst these include advocacy, capacity building, and we also work through convenings and also work through movement building. The main reason as to why CIPESA today is partnering with the Data Protection Office is not because they're our friends, and it's not because we work in the same area or we try to achieve a similar goal, but it's because we also believe in building good partnerships, and we have also leveraged much from partnerships and work through partnerships, and that is why we are actually here. And also, data protection is central to our work that we do. And as maybe the National Director did mention, data today is very key. Some people refer to it as the new oil. As people say, you remember when they say, is oil a curse or a blessing? The oil curse, the word, those were the things about oil. Now, data is very critical and important because it has everything to do with the individual. And as CIPESA, we have really centralized data to be part of our work. We have dockets of data governance and also work towards using data to improve the livelihoods of people and also to protect privacy of the individuals. So we felt it very important because we had been in talks with the Data Protection Office for quite some time that on marking the annual Data Privacy Day, at least we have something that brings together data protection officers to not only refresh their knowledge, but also to build and enhance their capacities to ensure secure data protection in their respective organizations. Those are the few remarks I can make about CPESA. I am not alone from CPESA. We have a team of people who we have worked with. Whatever you see here, there's Data Protection Office here and the CPESA team here that joined us. Beyond that, I want to speak about something before we delve into our first presentation. At CPESA, we have what we call digital security and resilience. And as you may notice from the presentations you're going to have, data protection officers are supposed to take all the relevant measures, all the relevant precautions to ensure that there's robust security of people's data, or of data of the people that they deal with or they interact with. So today we have what we call the Digital Security Clinic. The Digital Security Clinic is just going to be outside there where you are having tea or the bites. We have a technology officer of CPESA who will be the head of the team, and then we have a number of digital security experts who will be there. Their main reason is for you to go and speak to them and ask them how you can actually buttress data protection at your offices, how you can safeguard against cyber attacks, how you can safeguard against cyber criminals. You can even present your email addresses of your offices to them, not giving them your information of access, but they have tools which will be able to tell you whether your emails are actually protected or not, whether they are weak or not, how long it takes for your email to be hacked, whether seconds, whether 100 years, or whether a zillion years. On that note, the people of the Digital Security Clinic will be here up to 4 p.m. While we anticipate to finish by 1 p.m., they'll be there for those of you who can stay around and you have issues to consult. Please kindly go there such that you make sure that you're in the good books of the Data Protection Office. Because if you leave when you're not sure of how you're protecting people's data and then you experience data breaches, the Data Protection Office will be waiting for you. Heavy penalties will be waiting for you. And the only way to avert that is by talking to the digital security team, which will be outside, just in the corridor there. Speak to them during tea breaks, speak to them during lunch break, and they'll be here up to 4 p.m. so that they can help you. With that, I think I've spoken much about CPESA. Any question about CPESA before we go into the aspects of the masterclass? Any questions? Any questions? None? Okay, all the same, thank you very much for coming. If you don't want to ask me questions, maybe I can ask you a question. Who can tell me about CPESA in 10 words? Anyone? Any volunteers? You see? Anyways, it's okay. So I will ask the gentleman at the back to project my presentation. So do you have it? I sent it to you. They gave me the email. It was chigulicharles@gmail.com. Is it there? See? Right. So once again, as it's projecting, thank you so much for coming. Data Protection Office, thank you for partnering with CPESA. And we hope that this partnership will continue and continue to build what we consider to be the key areas of data protection, including principles and data protection rights. And we hope that by doing most of this work, we'll make Uganda a better place and the world a better place. And we hope that we'll make people much safer in the spaces we live in by ensuring robust protection of their personal data. So as he's preparing to display, maybe I forgot to mention, since you're data protection officers, we did not come here to completely do lecturing and teach and do all these sorts of things. We can do that in classes. I'm also a teacher, so I'll ask that when we have some questions, we engage with each other such that we can learn from one another about the practices in our offices. So we'll start with, we cannot really speak about data protection unless we know the legal basis for data protection in this country. How many know the legal basis for data protection in this country? What is the basis? What makes you think you need to protect people's data? And okay, what forces you to protect people's data? Or what pushes you into protecting people's data? Any text? Any text? Yeah? Okay, there's a hand. Do we have another microphone? Oh. Here.
Data protection laws, both national and international.
It says data protection laws, both national and international. Do we know any? Anyone knows some of the laws? Anyone knows some of those laws? Yes.
Data Protection Act.
The Data Protection Act. There's another hand here. You want to?
The Constitution gives the right to privacy.
The Constitution. What else? Any other? They say national and international. I've heard of only national laws.
The GDPR. The General Data Protection Regulation. It's in the UK. Yeah. I think we've used it to benchmark on some of the provisions of our Act. Yeah.
Okay, she says the GDPR, and it is in the UK, and we've used it to benchmark. Any other view? Any other view? International. How about regional? Continental, okay. Continental. Any other attempt? Meanwhile, my presentation is still delaying, but we are going, yeah? We are in our master class. Okay. Any other instrument? Somebody knows? Continental? Continental? Any other? Hey, okay. So let's speak briefly about the GDPR. Is there anyone who wants to add to what she said about the GDPR? She says the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, the instrument, the whole world had to make sure they take measures to ensure that they have sufficient measures in place to protect data, especially for European subjects or European citizens. And so is our law, the Data Protection and Privacy Act, which we have talked about. It also has extraterritorial jurisdiction to apply to data of Ugandans for as long as you're company here and you're taking Uganda's data out of this country, then you must make sure it is protected. And wherever you send it, you must make sure they have similar data protection standards for all that. Then we have what you mentioned, the African Data Policy Framework. This is an instrument of 2022, right? And the drive is to make sure that all data governance policies, data protection policies align with the African Union Data Policy Framework. And the data protection framework is aiming at promoting the single digital market and also promoting digital transformation across the country. But people forgot the Malabo Convention. Yeah? Have you ever heard about the Malabo Convention? I think it is more specific on personal data protection and cyber security for Africans. Yeah, I've already started, so we can keep going. So, but my main job that I'm going to do, even as we scope into the laws, we're going to try as much as possible to understand the data protection officer as the strategic advisor. Yeah? Okay. Okay, they're asking to stand up. As the teachers, we talk too much and walk too much, so let me be here. So, data protection officer as a strategic advisor or as an important person as far as data protection is concerned. So, in here we're going to look at your roles, the basis of your roles, the potential what you consider to be offenses and penalties, as well as what the implications are actually for your organization. And you do as a data protection officer, who are you actually in your office where you work? And what is your role? Can we go to the next slide? Targeting the Indians. It may look white, but when you're actually Indian or not Indian. So that can put you actually in trouble. Education is one of them. Maybe before I cross to education, I was recently in Eastern Uganda and we're doing a training for journalists on guarding against disinformation, misinformation, and effective election covering and monitoring. And there was a candidate in Tororo for a parliamentary seat, and this candidate is actually of Indian descent. What I was told is that his parents have lived in Tororo for over 100 years. Okay, not his parents, but because they may not be alive. But his descendants came 100 years ago to live in Tororo. But from our discussions or interaction with these people, they were saying, who will give Muyindi? Indians, these foreigners, they have come. Now they even want to take over our country. They want to take over our district, okay? Why were they saying these Indians? That's why I'm trying to tell you that it's critical that your nationality, your names can be actually a problem. And you data protection officers, as you deal with people's information, you have to be keen on what we are mentioning here. Presentation has disappeared. Okay, I said passport photos. I did mention the nationality. I can also tell you your address, where you stay, where do you live, postal address, I mean physical address where you live can be your personal information because it can be used to identify you as an individual. Your gender or sex is also the other. It can be used to identify you. When you are entering there, I think you registered, when you're registering on a form, the part where they ask for your sex, okay? We'll say, we just read the name, we'll say this one is actually male or this one is actually female. Education, background or levels, if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, that can be part of your information. Occupation, your online identity data can also be used to identify you. Your religious or political affiliation or political inclination. Which party do you support? The moment you mention the party, trouble has come in because they have been able to identify you. Tribe can be a problem. Income, how much do you earn? They can start weighing your worth. Who are you? How much do you have? Are you a good target for robbers? Will you have enough to give them or not? Health records or health information. Dates of birth. Your date of birth can be used to identify you. And then, of course, your name. Yeah, your name is very critical. And also your phone number can also be used to identify you. So as you deal with people's data, please beware and be very careful about that information. Next, please. So, what is the scope of this law and how far does it apply? It applies to persons, individuals, institutions, or public bodies. You can look at Section 1 of the Act, who collect and process personal data, or who hold or use personal data within Uganda. But as I did mention, not within Uganda alone. If you're taking Ugandans' data outside, you must make sure that they have comparable data protection standards. And I'm sure in your reporting to the Data Protection Office, you have to mention some of those things. For example, they'll ask you, do you transfer personal data to across Uganda's borders? You have to acknowledge. And they'll say, for what reasons do you take that data? And you have to explain. And you also have to make sure that you inform them of the relevant security measures that you have in place to protect people's data, even when it is out of your hands. So outside Uganda, whoever collects or processes, holds or uses personal data relating to Ugandan citizens, the law also applies to those people, even if they are across the borders. Next, sir. Principles of data protection under the law. Yeah? So, as data protection officers, we are expected to certain precautions and hold particular standards in place that ensure protection of people's data. The first one is, not in that order, but accountability is one of them. You data controllers all data collectors, data protection officers, you must make sure that you hold data subjects' information in an accountable manner. Secondly, all data you should collect it fairly, and the collection should be done within the law. So fairness and lawfulness is very key when collecting data. Don't collect data which is outside the dockets of the law. Yeah? In other words, even when it comes to purpose, collect information is for a given purpose, not for everything that you want. Yeah? So if you want to know about if you want to give me a job and you want to know qualification, there's no need for you to know how I met my wife. Okay? If I have a wife, so did you meet them at law school, or you met them in practice, or how is it going to help you and my job? There's no way. So collect only information that is important. Then, of course, observe security safeguards. You must make sure, I've highlighted this quite often, make sure you have the relevant safeguards in place for protection of people's data. Take cybersecurity measures. Make sure the computers where you store people's data have strong passwords. They are well protected. Make sure the servers are well guarded. Also, make sure if you have files, make sure they are kept either under lock and key. And also make sure which will also cut across to that, after serving purpose, make sure all data is destroyed in accordance with your policies in the organization. Ensure transparency and participation in collecting information. Those you're collecting from, know why you're collecting it and what you're going to use it for. Let the data subject know why you're taking their information. And then, of course, ensure quality of information. Information should be of quality. Yeah? Good data, good information. Data quality should be ensured. The data should be accurate, not false. And if it is false, there's a right that arises after that, the right to rectification, such that someone or a data subject can request that the information is rectified. Do not keep wrong information about individuals. Give them an opportunity to come and rectify it. And of course, I did mention that maintaining data for an authorized period. According to the data protection law, you're supposed to keep data for a certain period. I need to be reminded, Jordan, how many years? Is it 7, 5, or 10?
When it comes to retention, the law is a bit general, but of course, as PDPO, we are coming up with guidelines, which will be in position to speak to a number of the different sectors that we have and how long they can retain information. For example, if you look at the tax laws, those call for about 7 years. If you look at the financial institutions, the Anti-Money Laundering Act speaks to 10 years of retention. So there are a number of different periods provided for within the various laws, but that will be standardized under the guidelines being developed by the office.
So that is it. And make sure that once the data has served the purpose, as I did mention, destroy it, burn it. Yeah? If it's on a computer, de-identify it. Okay? If you think you cannot dwell with it, like statistical information or population-related information, like when they are carrying out the population census, de-identify, remove people's names and identities, yeah, such that when somebody looks at the information, they're able to just look at it and make sense out of it, but not really identifying particular individuals. Yeah, so information should be accurate, complete, and up to date. And that is why we said you must give people an opportunity to rectification, make sure the data you keep about them is actually correct. So that is a small cycle. It is not in any particular order, but something, just an impression to show you, to summarize some of the data protection principles that you must adhere to. And not only adhering, but also ensuring that data subjects are actually protected. The next slide, sir. Rights of the data subject, these I've spoken about, but just know that your data subjects have rights, and you must ensure that those rights are actually respected. In that chart, again, you'll see some sections, the sections are actually highlighted. They have a right to access the information as and when they request. Even you have a right to access your information if it is somewhere. If you gave information to a bank and you're not very sure, you can say, can I please have a look at my information? They should be able to give it to you. And when they come to you saying, you collected information about us because you said you're bringing a particular service to us. I'm not sure. Can I please have a look at my information? You should be able to give it to them. Financial institutions, telecommunication companies, whichever the sector you're from, internet service providers, you should be able to adhere to what those rights are. Then, of course, the right to automated decision making. Now, automated decision making under data protection or under these data practices is where, for example, decisions may be made concerning you based on your data, but using, say, technology or machines. And here what we can speak of most is artificial intelligence. Okay? Or a machine is positioned to make decisions about you without your consent or without your knowledge. So you should be asked. There are so many challenges associated with automated decision making, and we feel it is a right that the data subjects are actually informed, because it has a tendency to promote discrimination or discriminatory tendencies against individuals, and also it has a tendency of being overly intrusive of people's privacy. Automated decision making can go beyond even where it is supposed to stop, because it may not involve the human hand or the human mind. Notification, I did mention this, and erasure. If information is not correct, people should be given an opportunity to correct it. If there are cases of where information should be deleted and someone feels you need to get rid of it, they have a right to ask you to delete that information, yeah, or to destroy it. And then there's what we call data portability, movement of data across borders. So, as a data subject, they should be able to have their information, even to use it. If I'm not in Uganda and I'm somewhere, I should be able to have my information, to use it. And if I can ask you to give me the information, you should be able to provide it. I think banks are some of the key institutions that really help in this. Those of you who do online transactions using Visa card, MasterCard, and the like. Right to object or to participate. I have a right to refuse you to collect my information. I think this you know. So if someone refuses, don't curse them, don't abuse them, yeah? And then, of course, do not use people's data for direct marketing unless you have their consent. I know that the Computer Misuse Act actually removes liability from people who use people's personal information to disseminate unsolicited commercial information, like adverts. Maybe you're selling something. I don't know why that happened, but it's under our law. If I want to market my goods, I may get your numbers and send you the message. You may not sue me for receiving unsolicited information under the Computer Misuse Law, but you should try as much as possible to avoid using people's information for direct marketing. And of course, is there any right I've not highlighted there? I think I've mentioned them, all of them. Just make sure that you observe and protect rights of the data subject. However, I have a question which I want to ask you. One day an insurance agent contacted me and immediately spoke in my local language. Okay? I asked them, why have you spoken to me in my local language? And where did you get my phone number from? Someone was not able to tell me, but I also contacted my cousin who is in the insurance business to tell me, where do these people get the numbers, and why do they start by addressing you in the local language. One of the reasons that they address you in local language such that they can create quick rapport with you. Probably you feel empathetic and feel you have to subscribe to their whatever they are trying to sell. But what amazed me most, they told me that when you go to NASA, I don't know if there are any people from NASA here, that when you go to NASA, they have books. Those books are for different professions. They have names and phone numbers of individuals. So if you're a lawyer, you'll find yourself in the list for lawyers. Okay? Your name, your phone number, and all that. If you're a doctor, you'll find your name in the book or list for doctors with your phone numbers listed. Even email addresses are also there. So they use that to contact you. And I know NASA is a very crazy street. You may not know the publisher. Yeah? All you see is a book. But my biggest question is, where do they get these contact details from? Anybody knows where they get them from? And from NASA to tell us so that we come for you? Seems not to be anybody, yeah? But I think the Data Protection Office needs also to follow that up and see, because it's really crazy, yeah? Serious breaches there. So, the next slide. Who are you then? You people, data protection officers. Do you understand who you are? The law defines some few key terms. We have who we call a data collector, a person who collects personal data. Like you've registered outside there. We have collected your data. That's a data collector. A data subject, you, whose information was collected outside there. You're the data subject. Even me, I wrote my name. I am also a data subject. I'm a data subject of MTN. I'm a data subject of Airtel. I am a data subject of an internet service provider that I use. I'm a data subject of my employer. I am also data subject of, I don't know whether I should say, okay, you're also a data subject of your boyfriend or girlfriend, okay? Because they have your information, they have your phone number, they have your names, yeah? So you're a data subject of your landlord, where you're renting, yeah? You're a data subject of a person who gave you a loan. You're a data subject of a bank. So those are what we call data subjects. So I want to see my data controllers. Data controllers mean people who alone or jointly with other persons determine the purpose for and the manner in which personal data is processed or is to be processed. So, do you agree? Are you also a data controller? Are you data controllers? Yes, you are. Whether you accept or not, you are. Next. We are all data controllers for as long as we collect people's data. No, not next. Go back. Up. And of course, data processors are persons other than an employee of the data controller who processes the data on behalf of the data controller. Somebody beyond that, a third party who processes personal data. And then, of course, processing means any operation which is performed upon collected data by automated means. Say you're sending through email, such information. That is data processing. The next, sir. Data Protection Office. I'm not very well placed to speak about, but since we are partners, I'll tell you briefly about the Data Protection Office. The Data Protection Office, its logo almost looks like that, but it is designed in a particular way, yeah? The Data Protection Office is established by Section 4 of the Data Protection and Privacy Act, CAP 97. And also, that law provides for your functions in Section 5. Functions of data protection. Functions of the Data Protection Office are provided for in Section 5 of the law. Next, sir. Next slide. Oh, what are their roles? Those are some of the roles in summary of roles of the Data Protection Office. They oversee and enforce the Act, which is the main reason why we're here and why we must comply with the law. They're there to promote privacy and data protection. They monitor, investigate, and report, so they keep an eye on how you're performing. And that's why they ask you for annual reports before you're issued with Is it annual registration? Yes, before you're registered, they ask you what have you been doing, what measures have you taken, have you promoted anything, have you refreshed your staff, have you trained anybody, and so on and so forth. So they do that as well. They also are supposed to raise public awareness, and this partnership is part of it. They're also supposed to receive and investigate complaints. I am sure you've been on the lookout. Some complaints have been lodged to the Data Protection Office. They have been investigated. Decisions have been made. And at some point, penalties actually have been issued. They also supposed to establish and maintain a register. That is a official data protection record. And then they're also supposed to perform other functions according to the law that touch data protection. Next, sir. So, being positioned as a data protection officer in your organization or institution, according to Section 6 of the Act, the head of the institution or an executive director is supposed to appoint someone and designate them as data protection officers. And I'm quite certain that's how you derive your mandate, and that is why you're here, because you were appointed to be a data protection officer. And once you're placed in that position, it requires that you exercise the highest levels of leadership in as far as data protection is concerned. You must make sure you take the relevant precautions, you take the necessary advisory measures, you take the relevant cybersecurity measures, you make sure that your staff are equipped with the relevant skills to protect people's data. Next slide, sir. So, we get compliance to work. You must first of all register. There is a brief procedure you go through to register with the Data Protection Office. You complete those forms, you pay registration fees, you submit your application is reviewed, and then they issue with certificates of registration. And as most of you know, each year you must actually register. It's not a one-off. We are trying to push for a one-off because I'm also on your side, yeah? I also want to push for a one-off such that you pay once and then you are actually registered. But also the reality is that the Data Protection Office needs funds and resources to keep running. Now, if it was a one-off, then where will they get the resources from? We'll see what happens when we keep advocating for our rights as data protection officers. Next. What is expected of you? I did mention, as data protection officers, you're supposed to establish robust governance and oversight mechanisms and have clear reporting guidelines, okay? As well as mandatory registration policy development. This is expected of you, and you must never let go of it. Second, you must operationalize data protection principles, which we highlighted. This means you must maintain processing records, conduct data protection impact assessments, and also do implement security safeguards. Do you know what data protection impact assessments are? Anybody knows who can explain to us what that is? Data protection impact assessments. Anyone can give it a try? Anybody? Jordan is ready with the microphone to bring it to you because you're our boss. So, anyone would like to take a shot? Okay. Anybody wants to take a shot on environmental impact assessment? That lady there, I see she has an answer. Okay.
I wanted to talk about the DPIA. Okay. DPIA is assessments are supposed to be conducted when the collecting or processing of personal data may affect the rights of data subjects. So it's supposed to be done prior to the collection and processing of personal data from the data subject to mitigate the risk that may arise from that collection or processing.
Excellent. Thank you. I will not add, I will not pollute his answer. Next slide, sir. You're also supposed to champion awareness raising, training your members of staff, including the person who designated you as a data protection officer. So you're supposed to sensitize your members of staff and also raise awareness of your data subjects, clients, customers, especially say for financial institutions, for telecommunication companies, internet service providers. This is something you're supposed to continuously do. And then, of course, you're supposed to facilitate respect of data subjects' rights to ensure that you have effective complaint handling mechanisms in place, and also handle requests of data subjects, respond to them, and ensure that transparency is assured. And complaints handling means you must also work together. In case something is beyond, then you must report it to the Data Protection Office for appropriate action. Next. So proactive monitoring and reporting. You're supposed to conduct regular audits, breach notifications, and also do annual compliance reporting within 90 days of the end of each financial year. You must make sure that you report to the Data Protection Office. Next. These are some of the offenses. I will not go through them that are listed under the Act, which you need to pay attention to. This presentation will be shared with you, such that every time you feel like you're going to blunder, you look at that table to guide you and ensure that your organization stays safe and that you also stay safe. That table is important because, according to the law, your organization that is in breach of personal data protection may be penalized up to 2% of its annual returns, okay? So if MTN's annual returns is, I don't know, 1 billion, I don't know how much it is. If it is 1 billion US dollars a year, it may be penalized up to 2% of 2 billion. Do you know how much money that is? Of 10 billion US dollars. You know how much money that is? So those who did mathematics can just do 2 out of 100 times 10 billion, then you'll get the amount. It's a lot of money. Sometimes it can even lead to closure of institutions that are actually relying on that 2% that will be taken away. And then second, of course, there may be some arrests of officers from organizations. They may be arrested. They may come for your ED. I don't know if they'll arrest Jordan again. Are you going to arrest me, the Data Protection Officer, or my ED when you're in breach, and then I be taken to prison? Who are you going to arrest? Both of us.
Not to scare the DPOs, but the law provides for every officer that is held responsible in case, for example, a breach happens or in case any unlawful disclosure of personal data is done. Every officer of the institution that is involved in that act is definitely held liable. So it may not necessarily be the DPO, but it could be officers within the entity that allowed this to happen.
And you may be imprisoned for a period not exceeding 10 years. That means it can even be 1 month, even 1 day, but should not exceed 10 years. But if you're unlucky and they hand down 10 years, my brother and sister, it is trouble. So you must take the thing serious. So the next slide. So those are some of the consequences I did mention about. You may be fined, then you may be imprisoned, yeah? You know when the things happen. Next slide. So it's not the police that gives you a fine, but it's just pictorial, but you would be fined. Yes, sir. Here's a question.
Thank you. The breach that you mentioned, does it include, let's say, in instances where the system is hacked? what happens?
Okay. Where the system is hacked, you feel you could have a justifiable cause or justifiable reason, yeah? But the bottom line is that, for example, as a data protection officer, I think somebody else will talk about risk assessments and taking the relevant measures. So that, for example, institutions, for example, the law requires that you take frequent measures to ensure that your systems are up to date, okay? You must move with technology to make sure that they are not vulnerable to attacks or cyber attacks. If actually probably you show that you have been taking those measures, but nevertheless, that notwithstanding, the hack happened, you may have higher chances of surviving. But if they actually discover that you've not been taking any measures or even to check vulnerability of your systems and that happens, then it is another story. But someone will cover that, I think, later on. Either I think the next speaker or someone later. They'll be able to talk about those risk assessments and also taking the relevant security measures. And that is why I also did mention that our cybersecurity guys, digital security guys are around. You can go to them and they can help you to sort some of those messes or some of those areas where you worry there actually might be a problem. Yeah, so that will be elaborated later. I want the presenter who will be handling that to pack that, and then they will unpack it for you later, especially from the perspective of the Data Protection Office. Any questions for me before I leave? I want to go because any other questions? Yes, Jordan, there's a question here on the table next to the projector here. Lady on this side, yeah.
Thank you. My question is about the data protection policy, which each organization should have. I don't know whether it's you who will be handling or someone else.
I can respond to that. It's part of what I have actually covered. But is that the question or the question is coming?
The question is coming.
Okay, let the question come.
I understand that each organization should have the data protection policy, and maybe I would like to know what are the key areas which, as in when we are making those policies, what are the key areas that we should look at?
Thank you very much. She did mention, I think we've been covering some of the key areas. One, when you're looking at a data protection policy, as the word suggests, data protection policies, guidelines on how you're going to ensure protection of personal data, either of staff, your clients, customers, your clientele, or the people you deal with on a daily. What are the key things to look at? The key things to look at is what measures are you going to take to protect people's data, okay? That is one of them, and it's actually the most important, because within that is now when you bring in, because you already recognize data protection rights, data protection principles, then those ones can later cover organizational attitude towards that, cover how the organization treats people's data and information, how the organization actually ensures that security is assured. And actually, beyond just the data protection policy, you may even go ahead to even have another one on cybersecurity, okay? Or you can have a section on cybersecurity in your policy to show how the organization actually protects people's information in the digital sphere or in the digital space, beyond the traditionally known paper, maybe writings or registration sheets. But how about when we come into the online space? So the policy should have all those guidelines that the organization is going to follow to ensure that people's data is actually protected, that security is buttressed. So there should be aspects of cybersecurity, there should be aspects of of rights and principles that are going to be respected. You should have aspects of how long you're going to keep people's data for, how long are you going to keep the data for, and what are your measures? How do you destroy the data? Aspects of de-identification. How do you make sure people are not identified? It should have aspects of who is the responsible person for people's data and what are their duties and responsibilities. You can even specify penalties for them in your policy at organizational level in case they fail. You should also have aspects of continuous awareness raising and training, refresher trainings for staff, capacitating staff. So just make sure that, just as you've ever seen any other policy, organizational policy, all those things should be, who qualifies to be a data protection officer? Will you pick Askari, an office cleaner, to be a data protection officer? Which I don't think that can be the case. So the ED, as you've mentioned, will designate a person. So, but within those parameters that you could have set. And the ED may have appointed even before a policy, but one of the requirements, for example, is that the person appointed actually goes ahead to ensure that they initiate the process of developing a data protection policy and have all those things in place. We can talk more, and yes, 2 hands, 3 hands at the back. I think we'll take those 3, and then after I will take my leave, yeah? And sit. We have hands there.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you, Edwin, for the presentation. I wanted to know, you talked about a fine. How do the data subjects benefit from the fine? Joseph Kasozi from HRC.
I know how they benefit or how they don't benefit, but I don't know that I should send it to the Data Protection Office to respond to that. I'll ask the National Director, because this is a debate we've been having with him for quite some time, to respond. National Director, would you like to respond to Kasozi's question? Because me, I've talked with you several.
That's an interesting question. The way the law is at the moment, the fine does not benefit the data subjects because that fine is punitive in nature. However, the law is still open to how the data subject can be compensated. That is through Section 33. That affected data subject can go to courts of law and they seek compensation. Thank you.
Thank you, National
Yes,
Director.
Someone would like to add?
Oh, okay.
Okay, I think my addition is, whereas there is no monetary compensation to the, let's say, consumer, so Becca, like you said, it's punitive. And I think when you find money, it's also like a deterrent. So to the larger public sector and all consumers, and even the one person, is that as an offender or an abuser of a right, I would have learned my lesson, hopefully. And it means I'll not repeat the same act to that person, because I've been punished in a way of paying a fine, which will hurt me. So I would still think, whereas it's not monetary, it still serves a purpose in form of a remedy to our consumer and the general public. Yeah.
And you'll also avoid breaching data rights of other individuals because of those penalties. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm here at Rwandeke from National Curriculum Movement Center. My question is related to the 2%. You've mentioned that the 2% targets the profits, annual profits from an organization. And I'm looking at a scenario that it is most likely targeting the private sector. Yet, we have public sector as well, and we don't make profits. So, I don't know, I stand to be corrected. I think it should be targeting the annual budget of an organization, not the profit. Thank you.
I'll give the next person. We'll take the question, then we'll respond. I'll also send that to the National Data Protection Office, that question. I hope you've noted it. Next.
Yes, thank you. My name is Mark Muganga from Fidelis Leadership Institute. My question is, how do we regulate, how do we deal with data protection and privacy in this new era of AI? If I input data into the AI to help me with different tasks here and there, am I going against the basic principles of data protection and privacy? So how does the DPO and you, their partners, deal with data protection and privacy in this age of AI? Thank you.
Finally, the other gentleman.
Thank you so much. My name is Kisira Stephen from the Insurance Regulatory Authority of Uganda. He has partly asked my question because I quote a very recent example is when we were under audit, we provided all the information regarding, lots of information in the department, and what the auditor had to do was to scan and upload all the info that were provided into AI, and then did the analytics. So basically, I don't want to go, that was the question that I really wanted to ask. Another question that I wanted to ask, but since he has asked, I think I'll benefit from that answer. My own question now is, there are, of course, very large data processors and controllers, the likes of telcos, banks, Electoral Commission, police, and then there's the integrators, and NERA. Do we have deliberate effort, or have we taken deliberate effort to engage these categories in as far as handling data is concerned, and they also just subscribe the normal subscription like we do as small data handlers? That's my question. Thank you.
So Data Protection Office will handle the two questions. Your question and the other question. I will try to respond to his question about AI, which they can also add on. Well, AI is a going concern, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence. Processes. I think there's been an initiative. The government, I think, constituted a committee on AI, artificial intelligence, and that committee was tasked, for example, with coming up with policies or a policy, and then later what we envisage is a law in the future that could guide on how actually AI can be responsibly used. At civil society level, we are also trying as much as possible to say we can support civil society organizations and maybe the other sectors like private sector to develop internal policies on how they can actually use artificial intelligence without necessarily being overly intrusive or going beyond the limits of what data protection actually requires of us. And we believe that with those policies in place, organizations will be guided and they will know their limits beyond which they shouldn't go in as far as using AI is concerned. But AI, as you mentioned, is a big issue even in academic institutions, even in organizational work. Staff can no longer reason. People just punch stuff and then the proposal writing, you write proposals, then the people who are receiving proposals are actually able to flag that this is artificial intelligence, you're not able to get the resources, and so on and so forth. So AI is a going concern, but those are some of the key interventions that are coming up. So now I ask the Data Protection Office to respond to those questions. Annual returns vis-a-vis budgets. So, over to you, National Director, to respond to.
There was a question about the entities that process data on a large scale, especially for government, if they are being monitored to ensure compliance with the law. Yes, starting with the first step of compliance, which is registration. They are registered. NERA is registered with PDPO, URA, URSB, and even Electoral Commission is registered. Now, monitoring their compliance, we are auditing some of them, especially for government. NERA, again, URSB, to check on their levels of compliance and recommend ways through which they can bridge the gaps that will be established by the audit. And then for AI, yes, it's an issue that everyone is grappling with. As PDPO, we've been intentional to ensure that we give proper guidance. PDPO is part of an organization. It's an AI policy maker network for Africa and Asia, which helps in building capacity, but then also the guidance that we've been giving in regard to AI and usage of data. AI's foundation is information. So before you upload that information, we always guide. It should be stripped of identifiers, names and all that, because if you don't, it may actually turn up into another person's prompt, rather information that will be given following a prompt. Now, the way it has been designed, especially that there are higher levels of privacy protection which are provided for those that use the paid versions. So a person is given an opportunity for you, when you go to the settings, to deactivate that particular element of the data that you feed it, not to be used for training the AI models. Of course, it comes with these challenges. It may not remember your conversations, but it will increase on the protection of the data. So with that, again, we are looking at, still within this privacy week, there'll be a conversation on how to use AI, but specifically from the angle of the health sector. I encourage each one of you to log in and listen in. We'll be having experts from the Makerere AI Health Lab and also others from academia beyond Makerere that will be contributing, and also practitioners as well. Thank you.
I think one question pending, right? Are they done? The one he asked.
I missed one about government, whether the law covers government, the 2%. The law is not prescriptive in that regard, but the guidance we give is that government, you're also covered. It is 2% of your annual budget.
All right, thank you very much. Let me stop here, and I want to say thank you for listening to me and for participating in the conversations. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the moderator.
A round of applause, please, for Edrin. Thank you so much for that presentation. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you about the privacy notice that we do have for this particular event. We do have a privacy notice which stipulates how we are collecting your personal data and what we are going to use it for. This should be available at your table, but if not, you can as well find one at the registration desk. For those that are not interested in their pictures being taken, for example, you can just reach out to me or anyone at the registration desk to let me know, and then we'll be in position to do that. Next, we'll be hearing from, we'll have a presentation from Mr. Stephen Mugabe. And at this juncture, I want to allow him come and take stage to make his presentation. You're welcome. Please, a round of applause for him.
Good morning. Thank you for honoring our invites to be with us on today's celebration. I'll talk about a risk-based approach to data protection. Applying risk-based approach to data protection. I know as data protection officers, our primary role and objective is to ensure our organizations comply with the law, and the requirements for compliance sometimes seem to be quite many. And to help us comply better, we take different approaches. We don't want to leave out any requirement or any obligation, but we are saying, what do you do to ensure that amongst the requirements for compliance and the limited resources that you might have in terms of budget, you're still able to ensure your organization complies. That's why we're going to employ a risk-based approach, and then it will help us to be able to see how we prioritize our compliance obligations, our compliance efforts, and remain in compliance with the law. Slide, please. It's important that we start by understanding what risk is. We have different understandings, either from a cybersecurity perspective or from our own lives. But when we are talking about risk in terms of data protection, our primary concern is the data subject, me and you. As earlier indicated, every one of us here find ourselves to be data subjects in one way or the other. We did provide our personal information at the registry. Now, should that information be mishandled or misused, it means there is going to be harm to you as a data subject, and the risk in this case is what can happen to you once your personal data is misused. So the potential for personal data processing to result in physical, material, or non-material harm to individuals, including loss of control of their personal data. Now, that is what we call the risk. So when you're giving us the information, what is the risk to your privacy? Now, understanding what risk there is, we are able then to ensure we have appropriate controls. For example, one risk to exposure of your personal details while we are registering is having that information accessible to everyone that did register. Okay? So if I went out and I'm able to see the details of everyone in the room, it means there is that risk that I could misuse that particular information over and above why it was collected. Now, understanding that risk means we are going to emphasize to the person at the registry not to share this information. Now, we are employing a risk-based approach. We know the risk, and we are able now to put a particular control. Now, when we go beyond this and have many more risks based on our operations and based on our implementations at our organizations, we come up with a combined lot of approaches that we can use to ensure compliance with the law. Now, privacy risk focuses on the impact of individuals. That is our primary focus. What is the impact of a breach to you as an individual? Now, your organization comes in as a result of the effect to the data subjects. Okay? Now, the organization is going to suffer fines, reputational damage, but after you, the data subject, suffering. For example, we are going to expose your information. You'll start receiving multiple unnecessary calls. Someone is going to target you because they know you're a data protection officer. I don't know who told people that data protection officers earn a lot of money. So they will now start calling you for loans. They'll tell you, oh, you understand you're a DPO now. You can qualify for a 35 million loan, 100 million. I saw your name in the DPO register. You must be earning a lot of money. Now, that is harm to you as an individual. Now, after the harm to you as an individual, now it becomes a reputational damage to PDPO and CPESA that did collect your data at the registry. And then file a complaint in which could result into fines. So when you're looking at the aspect of risk and data protection, you're going to take it from first principles. Principle number one is the data subject. How many data subjects do you have? 1, 2, 3, 100. Compounding impact means the more people you have, the bigger the risk. That means the stronger the controls that you need to have in place. From the understanding of risk and how it affects the individuals to how that now moves to affect the organization is what is going to be important for us to be able to put in place appropriate controls. Next. Now, a risk-based approach to data protection prioritizes resources by focusing security efforts onto the most significant risks to individuals' rights, rather than applying a one-size-fits-all. Okay, we're going to say, fine, we have risks ABCD, and be able to know what is going to affect the individuals most, and what is going to result into more reputational damage or fines to the organization. So you'll find that the higher the risk, the more controls, or the faster the focus. We're going to want you to handle the higher risk challenges or the risks that are going to affect the data subjects more, and then put the appropriate controls. You could decide to ignore certain risks, as we shall see in the upcoming slides when we talk about risk appetite. So, for example, you need to identify, assess, and mitigate high-risk processing activities. For example, if you're processing millions of customer financial transactions, it means you need to ensure that they are done in a more secret way. Access to the processing is limited to a few people, as opposed to when you have 1 or 2 transactions. But take it, it doesn't mean that one person's rights are neglected. No. I'm simply saying the bigger the risk, the bigger the burden on you to put appropriate measures to ensure that you do not have any challenges. Next. So the risk-based approach recognizes that not all personal data processing is equal in terms of potential impact to the data subjects. For example, someone knowing my name and someone knowing my name and where I stay. It is a higher risk for someone to know my name plus where I stay. If they only know the name, it's okay. Probably sometimes there could be another Stephen Mugabe somewhere. Okay? They cannot easily put face to that person. But if you go, Stephen Mugabe, who works at PDPO, stays in Nigeria, drives car number XY, that means that person can easily be identified. And if there is any wrongdoing, that person can easily be targeted. Now, that is the effect of the risk. Now, understanding that you have information about all the employees in an organization, I don't know if we have any people from HR here. Now, HR will have records about me, including my name, my position, next of kin, my children, the official and the unofficial, knows my salary, knows where I stay. So if HR decides to put out all the records to the public, that is going to be a higher risk to the reputation of the organization. So in your advice as a DPO, you're going to ensure that the HR records have stronger access controls because you know what kind of information HR has. Okay? Now, if you don't analyze the records in that way to be able to get an understanding of what could happen if such records come to the public, you're going to think, oh no, it's okay. This is HR. They don't process money. Sometimes we think everything is about money, but you forget that there is an element of that aspect that comes into control. So GDPR risk-based approach requires that organizations identify, assess, and mitigate risks to individuals' data privacy proportionate to the likelihood and severity of harm. Okay? If someone knows where I come from, what can they do? Now, what is the harm in knowing where I come from? What is the harm of knowing how much money I earn? Okay? That is when someone is going to target me end of month and say, you know what, I think he has some money. Because they already know I earn a certain amount. By the way, for personal information, unless there is misuse, we may not see a problem. It is at that point where there is wrongdoing that it really becomes a problem. So risk-based approach allows us to tailor security measures based on sensitivity, volume, and processing complexity. So the way you handle records at the reception cannot be the same way we're going to be handling payroll information because of the nature of sensitivity of the information. This does not mean that the people coming in to our office and registering at the reception should be taken for granted. However, there is more risk and harm to the data subjects when we expose certain categories of information. And why do we go risk-based approach? To try and manage the resources that are available. The previous presenter talked about a DPO as a strategic advisor to management. you should be able to advise management and say, okay, based on our processing, based on our finances, I think we should focus on ABCD, which will help us not get exposed in one way, but also allow us to comply with the law. Next. How does the risk-based approach work? It focuses on potential harm to data subjects like discrimination, identity theft, financial loss, rather than risks to the business. First, focus on the data subjects, and then from that, build on what it means to the business. Now, at that point, you're guiding management based on the customers and also the business. Because if we lose the customers, who are our data subjects, in the end, we will not have business. And tell any executive the problem to the business, then you have their heart. If you start preaching rights to data subjects without relating it to what it means to the business, then you're not going to get any support in terms of implementing the privacy to ensure compliance. Someone is going to ask you, okay, the data subjects are not going to be happy. Fine, it's okay. Let them not be happy. But if you bring in the aspect that if the data subjects are not happy, it means we will not be getting revenue. It's going to affect our cash flows. It's going to affect our clientele. Then you're speaking to what executive management wants to hear. They want to ensure that we retain our clients, we continue to operate and make more money, and also avoid any fines as a result of non-compliance. So in risk-based approaches, we are trying to ensure we remain accountable. That means we need to document decisions and data processing activities. We need to employ approaches such as data protection by design, carry out data protection impact assessments, and have appropriate security measures. We'll see how we come to each of those. Next, please. Now, we are talking about risk-based approach, and our intention being focusing on high-risk processing activities. But then the issue is going to be, we value all our activities, we value all our processing. How do we determine what is high risk and what is not high risk? High risk processing is more likely where the processing could cause significant harm if something goes wrong. If you expose the entire payroll. We had a case where I think it was a certain bank that put out bank balances of a senior official within Bank of Uganda. And there was outrage all over. What does that mean? It means everyone who has money in that bank is going to start moving it, because anytime soon they will also be exposed. Just out of one exposure, imagine if the exposure was for 10 records. It means now the people moving would even be more. Now, common indicators of high-risk processing. Processing special category or criminal offense data, large-scale processing, and that is likely to affect many individuals. Now, special category of data, of personal data, includes data such as health records. Who of us would want to go around showing their HIV positive certificate? Now just imagine, in confidence, the health center that gives you the treatment or that provides you the service exposes this to everyone, or puts out the records of the 1 million people that are under treatment. It means now those people are now going to be segregated. Everyone will look at them and say, okay, this is their condition and all that. So looking at special categories of personal data in your processes, that means you need to carry out a data mapping exercise, record of processing to understand what kind of data that you have and be able to put appropriate measures. Processing that involves vulnerable individuals such as children, patients, and employees. It's important that when you're handling in any of your processes, if you have any health insurance providers here, you call a health insurance provider, you're sick, you disclose every kind of information. You don't want that information because you're vulnerable at that point. You need medical care. So you need to ensure that if in any of your processing you have special categories of information or information involving vulnerable individuals, you handle it with appropriate measures. Now that means the way you handle that kind of information should attract more security compared to other processing. Systematic monitoring, tracking, or surveillance, automated decision making. Someone already asked about the use of AI. If we are going to use automated decision making, or we are profiling information about individuals, we need to ensure that we have the right security measures in place, the right controls to ensure that we don't go against the law. Next. Okay. Next, please. So, high-risk processing activities require that we put stronger mechanisms, stronger controls, and attend to them first. Now, with that, it means you're reducing the risk to your data subjects and also the risk to potential fines and to the organization. Remember what we said, the risk is first to the individuals who are your data subjects, and then once the data subjects are affected, it now goes on to be a risk to the organization. Now, how do we identify high-risk processing activities? Okay, we've given a bit of examples, but you should be able to do this within your organization. And like we said, we don't have a one dress fits all. Okay, it has to be based on one, the work that you do, the technology implementations, the number of records, and the kind of personal data that you do have within the organization. So one of the things that you need to be able to do within the organization is data mapping and record of processing. What does this help? It provides visibility of what data is processed and how, also why. Now, as a DPO, if you don't know the data that you process within the organization, it means you cannot advise, you cannot guide on what implementations or controls need to be in place. You need to be able to know that every department handles this kind of information. From this information, information XYZ is personal in nature and needs to be protected. You need to have initial risk screening questions such as what type of personal data is involved, who are the data subject, how much data is processed, and how frequent. Okay? Take an example of a bank. A bank handles financial information. Financial records are special category of information in nature. Now that is already a note for you. The processing frequency is daily. Now with systems, you'll even get money at midnight. Anytime you have access to the mobile application, you can be able to withdraw money. Now the amount and frequency of processing is high. It means the systems that handle the requests need to have as accurate security controls as possible, so that I don't go in and I'm withdrawing information, I'm withdrawing money from someone else's account. When I have that particular access, it has to be giving me access to only my account. And the people who are managing these systems should also not be exposing the information of the clients. What would the impact be if data were misused or breached? Those are the decisions that are to be used when you're doing your records of processing and data mapping. What if something wrong happens? Okay? With all processing and everything, if nothing wrong happens, we are good. But your question and ability to advise management should be guided by what if something wrong happens, and your duty is to make sure that nothing wrong happens. Reference regulatory guidance and published high-risk processing lists, and engage cross-functional teams. Let's take an example. In a recruitment process, we're going to advertise a job and ask applicants to drop their applications to the office. I'll write everything about me to convince you to give me the job, bring my application and drop it at the reception. Now, in most cases, those applications at the reception will stay for some time until HR picks them. Now, if the person at the reception does not handle those applications with appropriate security measures, and by security measures, we don't only mean IT measures. Even getting the application and locking it into a drawer is a security measure. Okay? So if the person receiving the applications leaves them out there for everyone to see, we have failed on one part. That's why we need to engage cross-functional teams. Now, HR will come, pick the applications, and start the shortlisting process. The shortlisting could be done with someone else, maybe from the user department. And then after shortlisting, some people are going to be called for interviews, others are not. Where do they put those not going to be called? At least those going to be called are going to be put somewhere for reference as they are being interviewed. Now, those going to be called are still records of personal information that need to be securely kept. I hope you're now seeing the linkages between the different sections within, with the different functional teams within the organization. And then up to a point where the file will go to legal to draft a contract, and legal is also supposed to use it for drafting a contract and keep it at that point. So we need to ensure that we engage the different teams that are involved in data processing. If we could take a quick look through our organization and see how data flows from when we collect it, store, use, and say we're done with this information. who are the different people that are involved. You need to see, and at what point do they come in, what information do they see. If I'm going to work, say, based on a system, if someone has applied for a service through an online system, is the system accessible to everyone? Who accesses particular applications for services? Again, you need to ensure that there is alignment of the processing that you do to limit access to the information that is visible to whoever is in the chain. Next. Okay. Mapping data flows. Okay. What I've been talking about is what we call data flow mapping, trying to understand the way information flows within your processes. And that helps a lot when you're making a decision as a DPO on where to focus your efforts in terms of compliance controls. It creates diagrams that trace information movement through systems, network, storage points, and external connection. Now, these visualizations help to show the complete journey, more like the data life cycle for every processing. You will notice that data will go through different hands for different purposes for which it is collected. So the process is going to help you to identify for critical elements within your data handling. External entities. Who are you working with outside your organizations? Now remember, everything that goes outside your organization is outside your processing policies and control. But it's your duty to send that information with guidance notes. Okay? Data processing agreements. Tell the person that we are giving you this information, but restrictions XYZ must apply. And you must have mechanisms of monitoring to ensure that there's adherence to that. What processes, what data stores. I talked about a storage like a cabinet, a drawer. We have databases. Who has access to the system databases? Who has access to the drawer database? And the movement between components. If I have information locked up in a drawer, who has the key to that information? Okay. Now, you see, we build systems, computer-based systems, based on the manual systems. Where you have a physical key, I'm going to give you a username and password. Okay? So you relate and see based on the operations that you have. If we are to consider, say, an e-commerce system where a customer enters payment information, which moves to a payment processor, then to your database. I know we could have used online payment systems like Visa. Okay? You go, pick a service, at payment point you provide your card. The POS machine is reading your card, picking your information, sending it to your bank provider. The bank provider checks and confirms you have money, and the processing is made. Now, if that information and that flow is not clearly defined, you could find instances where money is going off your card, you have not taken on any service, or just simply because you consumed the service at one point X, anytime you come back, it is automatic, which also poses a risk. So with you mapping the flow of information through your organization, you're able to know at what point do I put more security on the external entities? Do I put more security on the process or the data store? Again, it is based on the sensitivity of information that you're handling. Next. Okay, this is to try and illustrate what we need to do to be able to create a data flow diagram. Identify key processes. Determine the critical business processes that involve sensitive or important information. We are going back to understanding what we are doing. Okay, understand the key processes that involve sensitive information. Map the data movement. How does the data move? Okay, take an example, application for a job. It involves sensitive information because I'm going to tell you my names, my education, everything, and where I've worked for the last 10 years. That information is going to come and then move from the reception to the next processing point. Now, as a DPO, that's where you're supposed to advise and say, since we have very critical information, let's not include sections A, B, C, D. Let this information be accessed by a certain level of seniority once it has been received. People who understand or people who have been trained and appreciate secure processing. Classify the data. Say this is very sensitive, this is slightly sensitive and in nature, and this is open information within our data flows. Sometimes we process information that is basic. We want to know everyone that is doing work with us, and it is provided by law. It is supposed to be public information. So based on the classification of the data, you're able to define who can have access to that information and what level of information they should and what they should be able to do. Let people access the information, but they cannot make alterations. Okay? And then visualize the interactions. If you're going to interact between HR and finance, at what point can this data be intercepted? Okay? If we are going to move the physical files, HR is handling a physical file, taking it to finance. Say it's a payroll file. We've had instances where some HR is sending a month payroll file, but sends it to all staff. Okay? Is sending a payment file on the 8th of the month, sending it to finance, saying, please process payment for the month. It is 8th. HR is saying process payment. People get excited. They know they are going to receive salary on 10th, maybe 2 days of processing, without understanding that the process it goes through is about 10-15 days. So when it is sent on 8th, the likelihood of payment is going to be after 15 days, taking us to like 25th or 28th. But because we made a mistake, everyone in the office now is expecting money. Come 12th, there is no money. 13th, no money. Morale goes down. People are not happy. They now start looking at the accounts people as the people who are sabotaging. They don't want to do their work. just because in the interactions there was an issue. So what do we do? If it is a system, put a control and say, okay, HR, when you're sending a payment file to accounts, make sure it is password protected. That is one. Put a check. Anyone trying to send a message with an attachment and you get the pop-up, are you sure you really want to send this message? Okay? It gives you second thought. You ask who is looking at me to ask me if I'm sure I want to send the message. That is the point you go back and check the recipients and realize that I'm actually sending to all staff. Okay? When we're doing the configurations for email, put that strict question when someone is sending email to an email called all staff. It asks, are you sure you really want to send this email to all staff? When that configuration is on email, you see people looking behind themselves to see who is asking. Yeah? Who is looking at me sending email? And then it also brings doubts. People start doubting IT. Someone says, so when we are sending emails, you guys are looking at us. Yeah? The other day I was sending email to all staff and you IT guys were asking, why am I sending email to all staff? It is a security control to make sure that all staff is public. Okay? It is big an audience. Are you sure you really want to do that? Then you review and finalize. Okay? And then the most important thing is to update regularly. Okay? Ensure that you keep looking through the data flow. Does it still make sense? Does finance still talk to HR? Is it still the same flow, or there is a newer flow? Last time it was physical movement of files, but now we have an automated system. How have you revised the data flow diagram? Next. Again, like I said, we cannot have one way of doing it that works for everyone. This is an alternative way of looking at it. You could have set goals and scope of the project. Now, this particularly looks at a case in point of you doing a data map for a particular project. Okay? You could have a project that is focused on implementing a system, or you're bringing in a new operation within the organization, and you have to do a flow to ensure that the project is run, putting into consideration the privacy obligations within the organization. Again, one thing I like to emphasize is we cannot run privacy independently. We have to work with other people. If we have IT, we are not going to have an organization employ an IT person that is primarily going to handle data protection concerns. We have to work together to ensure we drive compliance. Next. Okay. Now, remember we are looking at risk-based approaches to data protection. So it is important that you carry out a risk assessment, which is a systematic process of identifying and evaluating potential impacts of a project, system, or a process. So what we've been looking at is some of those approaches that we are required to undertake. So it helps you to identify the sources and magnitude of privacy risks. At that point, understanding the processes, doing the maps, you're understanding the sources and magnitude of the risks, and being able to think and say, okay, what is the likelihood? What will happen if I put ABCD? If I left this open for everyone to access? If I left the register for everyone to see what is going to happen. And then it helps you to carry out activities that comply with the law and also be able to advise management. It is important that management buys into the implementation or the requests that you need as a data protection officer to be able to ensure there is compliance within the organizations. So the risk assessment will provide a comprehensive and objective analysis of the implications of a project. It could be a project, it could be a data processing, but it has to make business sense to the organization for it to get buy-in. Next. What are some of the things that you need to do? This could be a repetition. I've talked about this. Identifying the data that you have. If you don't know what you have, then you cannot protect it. Map data flows, identify data processing activities, assessing compliance with privacy obligations, identify potential risks, analyze risk severity, and then develop risk mitigation measures and do the continuous monitoring. I'll talk about a few of these that I haven't discussed in the previous sections. Next, please. So, what do we need to do in identifying processing activities? Okay. Sometimes there is that question, we are doing our work, are we actually processing? So, one, we need to identify data subjects and types, determine whose data is being held. It could be employees, customers, suppliers, and what type of data. It could be the names, contact information, financial data, and all that. Now, within the organization, it is important that we identify where personal data is processed. Because sometimes when we talk about data protection and privacy, people move to IT. Well, it could be that IT is giving the business support, providing the systems, but before we get to the systems, we have the individuals who are handling certain data. For example, human resource. Human resource will prepare payroll, do the recruitment, performance reviews, and staff phone usage, for example. They are handling critical personal data of the staff and entering this information into a system. IT is managing the system to ensure it is up and running wherever it is needed. Now, you need to understand the data processing activities. You're now able to guide HR what needs to be in place. Marketing and sales, they handle customer databases, run email campaigns, have customer relationship management systems. Again, this is dependent on the organization and the kind of business that you're doing. IT security handle network logs, employee email, video surveillance through CCTV, and access control systems to allow you in and out to see who is coming in and all that. Now, when you understand this and know the effects of accessing, anyone accessing this information when they are not supposed to, you're able to develop the right controls and advise management as well. Again, understanding the processing activities, you're able to prioritize. For example, marketing and sales vis-a-vis proper HR handling. what do we focus on first? What can we do next? Because in your advice to management and trying to ensure compliance, you're going to draw budgets, okay? But the budgets need to come tagged to the risk to the organization and also come in a phased implementation manner. Special category of data needs to be considered first. For example, we are having payroll information, recruitment, performance reviews, details of our staff dependents. Now, that is special category of personal data that needs to be handled carefully. You'll advise and say we need to have stronger controls on this system. Let's restrict access in this and this way. Let's ensure availability is done to only 1, 2, 3 people based on either seniority or need to know basis. Determine if your organization dictates the why and how of processing. Sometimes your organization receives information, processes, makes a decision, and passes on the information to. And in most cases, you don't need to have the details of the personal data. So depending on the role you play, you're able to also guide and say, let's focus our efforts on securing section 1, 2 without spending so much. I know the business side of things wants to hear that we are not going to spend a lot. We are going to do ABCD without spending a lot, but you don't have to compromise quality and ensure we are working within means. Data mapping is not a one-time task. Activities, processes change, technology changes, so you also need to have a regular update of your mapping. So in identifying data process activities, once you identify them, do a continuous check. Do we still follow the same processes? Or an update in our HR policy change the way we do things, okay? We no longer receive physical applications, but we receive the applications online. That is going to have an effect on how the data is handled. So you need to have appropriate measures as well. Next. So, for you to implement a risk-based approach, you need to do risk identification and assessment. I'll quickly run through how this can be done. Identify the personal data collected, map data flows, conduct threshold assessment, analyze the risk and impact based on severity and likelihood, develop mitigation measures, controls to put in place. We've talked about this over and over again. And then the documentation and review. Let's go to the next slide. Prioritization and risk appetite is where it comes in now to be very critical for your judgment, okay? Privacy risk prioritization is a strategic process of ranking data protection threats based on likelihood and impact, ensuring that resources focus first on highest priority risk. We're going to see a matrix that we use to make that particular decisions. Remember, you've done your mapping, you've seen how the flow is, you know the sensitive information that you have, and now you're going to see what happens. How do you come up to a decision to say, okay, now I think we need to focus on ABCD. So risks are analyzed by identifying potential damage to data subjects and the organization using frameworks like NIST, FAIR to quantify the impact. We use prioritization factors. High priority risks usually involve regulatory penalties, significant reputational damage. Now, at that point, you're speaking to why we need to take action, okay? You're going to say, if we are exposed in terms of ABCD, we're going to face penalties. We talked about the 2% of annual turnover. Again, the director indicated that an aggrieved person can appeal to court for compensation. When you start looking at privacy risks in terms of what damage they can have to an organization, in terms of finances, reputation, it now speaks to taking the decisions. If we are going to lose customers, if we are going to lose our banking customers because we are exposing people's banking details as a result of a flaw in our security, then it is something that is going to need immediate focus and investment. So identify risks, assess the impact or likelihood, map the risk appetite, and prioritize, and then put mitigation measures. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, risk rating. This is going to guide us that our focus is going to be attend to where we have red first. Okay? For example, the probability level. What is the likelihood that if I have manual HR records, they can be accessed by anyone? And if they are accessed, what is the impact? If you have a very low likelihood and a very low likelihood and a very low impact, it means in our rating, that particular risk is very low. It doesn't mean that it does not exist, okay? It is low because the effect to the data subject is low, and it is also highly unlikely that it will appear. But if the probability is low, okay, it is highly unlikely that you're going to get access to my ATM card. It is very low that you're going to get it. But if you get it, you're going to die a rich man. Yeah? The impact is very high. Yeah? You start speaking English only. So if we combine a low probability and a high impact, okay, it means much as these things don't usually happen, when they happen, it is very adverse in terms of effect. Ensure your controls are top-notch. Do continuous monitoring. Okay, so that is how we do the risk rating matrix. A combination of very low with very low gives you very low. A combination of very low with very high will give you. So simply saying if the impact is going to be very high, but the probability is very low, we are going to get a low outcome. And then we focus our actions. You should be able to demonstrate to management that the identified risks are likely to happen or not likely to happen, and if they happen, we are able to present in such a matrix to guide the decision. And based on this, you should be able to have backup for investment and solutions to ensure we don't go on the wrong side of the law. Now, next is going to be a slide on prioritization. Next, please. Now, risk appetite level. If the risk rating is very low, internally as management, you can accept that and say, okay, instead of investing so much in this, we can try to manage the risk through routine procedures. Okay? Don't say the risk is very low, but we need to invest 1 billion in security systems. No one is going to give you that budget. But if you come and say the risk is very high, the option is to reject and remove or reduce. Okay? Talk to management and say, if we don't do this implementation, these are the likelihoods and this is the effect. The effect is going to be very high. We're going to lose reputation, we can lose money, we're going to be fined, and we're going to lose customers. It is the matter of urgency that we focus on that. Now, in terms of risk appetite, we have a organizational risk management. So it is important that as a data protection officer, you join the risk management team and provide guidance on the privacy risks, so that as management, we accept that once it is low, we can find procedure ways of working with that without going through an immediate or quick investment to address that particular concern. Next. So, proportionate mitigation measures. So, proportionate mitigation measures in data privacy involve tailoring security or organizational controls to match the specific level of risk. Okay? So, what we are saying is, if it is an issue of urgency, then we should have that kind of measure in place to address the urgency. This approach prevents overburdening low-risk processes and ensuring high-risk activities receive the necessary oversight. Even when you're doing your security monitoring configurations, the focus should be on the high risks. But then you do not ignore the low risk. Because once we ignore the low risk, it also grows wings. Before you notice, it will now be big and you cannot manage. So you do continue monitoring. That's why we said continue monitoring with procedural measures. Next. So, key strategies in a risk-based approach. One is privacy by design. Let's embed privacy controls into development of systems and processes. Once you think about what are the likely privacy concerns in developing our processes, then it means we do not fall into things that we didn't plan for. If you are designing a data collection tool and you're thinking privacy, then you need to think of how do I minimize the information collected. As opposed to collecting all the information, now you have to look for security measures to ensure that that information is not accessed by the wrong people. So privacy by design looks at how do you minimize the privacy risks through designing our processes, developing our systems. Data minimization, collect only the minimal data required. Okay? I normally have an issue with the certain collections. You go to the bank, they ask you who is your grandmother, who is your father, and these two people are no longer living, but you need them to give me a banking service. So that means you have the burden of protecting the personal information of me who is living and the dead. You can avoid such and say, okay, I'm only going to collect the information that is needed to provide the service. So tailoring documentation and compliance efforts to specific data processing activities, avoiding a one-size-fits-all, okay? Try to make sure that you understand the processes and be able to develop your documentation, your compliance. If it is a data collection tool, it should have compliance in mind. At what point are people consenting? At what point am I allowing access? Risk acceptance and transfer, if the risk is low or below the appetite, it may be accepted. If it is too high, it may be transferred, say, to cyber insurance, or you can actually put other mitigation measures. So it is important that, again, this is not all, okay? This is just to illustrate what we can be able to do. Again, based on the understanding of your processes, your data maps, you should be able to develop and have the right mitigation strategies. Next. Very important is you don't put measures and go to sleep. It is important you continue to monitor and improve an ongoing process of tracking and analyzing, enhancing IT infrastructure to detect threats. You should do continuous monitoring because it helps with early detection, reduce the risk, and helps you to improve your efficiency. And then before you do this, you need to have baselines and analysis of alerts and the regular monitoring of the profile. You need to know where you stand, okay? That's why we do all the processes of understanding the data that we have, do the maps, so that we are able to know the baselines and know, okay, we have 1 million records. Our records are going to grow at 10% per month. That means within 10 months, we have, say, 10 million records. How do we plan for and handle the 10 million records? How do we continue to monitor the alerts of requests for changes or changes to systems? And then ensure that your profile in terms of data processing is updated. If you had 100,000 people last year and you're operating at 100 people, it becomes a problem because now your capacity has changed and you're not aware of the mitigation measures that you need to have in place. Next. Accountability and documentation is very key, especially when it comes to compliance with the law. It is important that the organization takes ownership of the personal data it processes and can demonstrate the efforts. So in terms of you being able to have a clear risk-based approach, you need to have these in place. You need to have designated roles, okay? We have everyone doing their duty. It is everyone's duty to secure the information that you have, to ensure that you handle the data that you have responsibly. But whose role is it to ensure that the organization complies? You need to have a data protection officer. You need to have that person responsible to hold everyone else accountable. And then the leadership and oversight by management. You need to have a governance structure, third-party risk assessment. Oftentimes you don't work alone. You're going to have certain processes at other companies. How do you assess those companies that you work with for compliance to ensure that you do not get into compliance issues because of the people that you work with? And then documentation, it is important that you have a record of processing where you do data protection impact assessment, do a risk register, policies and procedures. Make sure you have all these documented because they are for the organization. We don't want a scenario whereby it is you who understands the privacy for the organization. The day you're not in, there's no compliance. So it is important we have all these records accessible by the right people and part of policies and procedures within the organization. Next. Oh, thank you. I don't know if it is in plan to have questions. Jordan?
Some questions?
Thank you, PDPO, for that presentation. Now, mine is a request still to the office. In the recent past, okay, this is like general. In the recent past, we've had these engagements with the DPOs quite often. My request would be that, because when I see all the presentations, and even this very last slide talked about governance, management support, and all those things, my inquiry to the PDPO is, do we have plans maybe going forward to also organize such similar engagements for the likes of, for example, senior management teams, directors of our organizations, so that, because when we talk about privacy by design, embedding those controls, the privacy measures in our processes, we are not looking at doing all that by ourselves as DPOs, but also with the support of the other stakeholders. So do you also have plans to see that you engage, you organize such similar engagements for the other people that we work with? Number two, still, there are so many elements in compliance to the Act, and also one of them being the risk assessments on, for example, third parties. I'm going to give an example of my sector, the insurance sector. There are some engagements, let's say some of the engagements that I've attended as a DPO, through the introductions, you can see some people that have engaged or that have come through. But we also deal with people like brokers, for example. The emphasis on compliance at our side and the other side, at a certain point when we are not engaged at the same level or in a same or similar way, you'll see that when it comes to compliance, there will always be discrepancies. So still my request is that when such engagements, because I know you have quite a number of registered DPOs, but I see probably some people don't so far feel the urge to have these engagements, to cooperate, to come through. So what are some of, or are you planning to also enforce a bit of compliance to such engagements, so that at a certain level, we all kind of speak the same language, pushing everything through to the same, I mean in the same spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for the insightful training. My question is on ROPA and data mapping. So I wanted to understand, these the ROPA and data mapping the same document, or it's different? If I conduct ROPA, does it serve the same purpose when I conduct the data mapping? If they are different, where does data mapping ends and where does ROPA begins? And you may find that, let's say where we work from or within our organization, we have like more than 30 units. Am I supposed to conduct, let's say, a ROPA for each and every unit? And if I conduct those, the ROPA for 30 units, am I supposed to share with each and every unit to what I've discovered or what I've discovered from my assessment? Then the second question would, is also still on privacy assessment, privacy risk assessment, and also the DPIA. Are they the same, or if I conduct a DPIA for a certain project that I may think it may affect the rights and freedoms of data subject, does it cover what would be covered in the privacy risk assessment, or I need to carry both, conduct both? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Farouk Aswazi, DPO Salambak. Mine is to do with inquiry regarding where the DPO best suits. Is it on the first level of defense, second level, or third level? Because different organizations have this role put into, merged with other roles. Just want clarity. Thank you.
Stephen, you want to take that round of questions?
Okay. I'll do last in, first out. Where the DPO sits, the office is going to provide a guidance on that. It is something that is coming out. We provide a guidance on where the DPO can sit. Also, minimum required qualifications, so that we go beyond saying Stephen is our DPO, but before you appoint him or designate him to be a DPO, you need to provide that person with some level of training to enable them to be able to do the work. So a guidance will be published on that note, and we can further provide support on that. Again, like I earlier said, we're also cognizant of the fact that certain roles are going to come in. They will require a whole lot of organizational change. So there's that flexibility of having someone be able to play two roles, as there is better appreciation and better planning to ensure that a purely independent role can be put in the structure. Okay? You may have an approved structure that does not have a DPO in place, but for you to be able to adopt that, it's going to take a bit of time. So there is that flexibility to allow the designation. Risk assessment versus DPIA, these are going to be two different things. A DPIA is going to be conducted when you are anticipating a project or undertaking work that is going to involve processing of personal data. But then the risk assessment is on your overall organization compliance risks. Again, when you're doing a DPIA, you carry out risk assessment. Now, the risk assessment could be focused on that particular project if it is a project that you're undertaking, or it could do an organization. So again, there's no straightforward answer, but it is case-by-case scenario best to be able to do that. Record of processing versus data mapping. I would say the data mapping may not give you as much detail as the record of processing. We're trying to understand how the data flows within the organization, where it starts, the sharing and all that. Now the data mapping will go into the record of processing will go into the different processes that are done for each of the flows that you have mapped out. The mapping helps you to understand where to put focus, and then you can do a detailed record of processing. Again, they are complementary in nature. One helps you to build the other better. In terms of sharing the ROPA with the people, again, this is a must. It is a requirement. The people involved in the processing need to know the processing they are undertaking, how sensitive it is. Because if you remain with that information, then it means you're fighting the compliance battle alone. Okay? Take it to the people, no, you're handling this information and these are the risks with your handling you need to have in place. You need to handle the data in this and this way so that the compliance journey is a team effort. People need to know the challenges, the risks, so that they are able to act accordingly. The issue of certain people not attending certain sessions, again, we do encourage that everyone who is registered as a DPO attends to our trainings, and the compliance and enforcement is not discriminatory. It goes to everyone. When you're in the insurance sector, whether in banking, everyone is supposed to comply. Why we encourage aspects such as third-party risk assessments is if you're to deal with a broker, it is incumbent on you to deal with a broker who has a compliance framework in their operations. So once we take up such steps, whereby if someone is not compliant with the processing, not compliant, not taking efforts to comply with the law, and they are going to lead you to non-compliance, you need to stay away with them. That, in a way, is going to encourage compliance by all other players. I agree, we need to have more engagements that involve senior management teams, and on a case-by-case basis, we have had these. For example, if you as a DPO want us to engage your senior management, you can reach out to us. We'll prepare a session and talk to senior management. Unlike the DPOs, where you have one organization with one DPO, and we can call many into one room. We cannot call senior management teams of different organizations into one room. So we do engage them on a case-by-case basis in consultation with the DPO, but there are also efforts. We have developed a curriculum that has a training that focuses on provision of knowledge and understanding to senior management teams that can be undertaken once the training starts. So if any of you here would want the PDPO to engage your senior management team for better understanding of the requirements, please reach out and we'll be happy to have that session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen Mugabe, for that presentation. Later on, we'll be in position to understand some of your key takeaways from all the presentations made. But at least my takeaway from Stephen's presentation is that if I landed on his ATM card, the probability of me dying a rich man would be very high. And the impact on my life as well will also be very high. So I hope that is able to happen. Thank you. We'll be in position to go ahead further into our next discussion. Unfortunately, we'll have a change in the program slightly. We may not be in position to have the health break, but we'll proceed to have the next presentation, which will be by Mrs. Barbara Among Arinda, who happens to be the Executive Director of the Credit Reference Bureau Association of Uganda. She'll be in position to give us a presentation on balancing compliance, risk, and business needs of our different organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me introduce and welcome Ms. Barbara Among.
Thank you. When I came in and I saw Jordan speaking a while back, I hadn't recognized him. So I was about to thank Baker, to tell him he's taking care of his people very well. If you agree with me, Jordan has put on some weight and he looks good. So I'll ask everyone to stand up. Please just stand up real quick. And what you're going to do, just whisper to your neighbor one of your biggest fears or challenges as a data protection officer, or as a compliance legal advisor or risk manager, whatever you are. Just whisper one of your challenges when it comes to data protection implementation within the organization you're working with. The whispers are not ending. How many challenges do you guys have? Okay, you can have a seat. So I believe with all the challenges that you've whispered, and even the guys online, I hope the challenge or challenges you have whispered to your neighbor, we've demystified already with the presentations. We've had a presentation from Adrian, Stefan, and I hope at least to a large extent we've been able to answer some of the questions that you have. Now, my presentation is very interesting, very, very interesting. And why is it interesting? Even for me, who is going to talk about it. My experience has been quite enriching, if I may say. From the different experiences I've lived in the different workplaces and where I am now. My practice started in a law firm as a legal officer, if I may say, or a practicing advocate, where you're interfacing with different clientele, from commercial clients, everyday clients that are coming in for land transactions, married couples that want divorce, etc., etc. Then I was lucky enough to get into the corporate world because that was my dream. But most importantly, because I wanted to learn how businesses work, be part of leadership, driving strategy. And through my career, I served in roles that exposed me to elements of governance, business aspects, and I'm lucky to have worked in a data processing company, but not only a personal data processing company, but also an organization that is supervised by Bank of Uganda. If you work with an institution that is governed by Bank of Uganda, you clearly know the level of compliance and risk the role you have to play if you're in those offices. So I'm very privileged to be here, to be sharing with you this afternoon, and good afternoon once again. My name is Barbara Among Arinda, and I serve at the Credit Reference Bureaus Association. I'm sure many of you have worked with credit reference bureaus if you're from the banking sector, insurance, IT, etc. I also am a founder of a consultancy organization in data protection called WinCurve. And yeah, like I've said, I previously served, in an organization that was supervised by the regulator, personal data processing as legal, company secretary, a data protection officer, And I'm happy to talk about this today's subject. So as we get into our presentation, I would love to thank the Data Protection Office for organizing this. I think having you all in the room is testament of the amount of work that has been done. And if I'm not mistaken, this is our 6th year or 5th of formally celebrating Data Privacy Day. 5th, yeah, right? Yeah. So it speaks volumes that we can even have all of you in this room and the number of people online and the kind of questions you're asking. Because if we started out, the kind of questions we're getting were as simple as, what is data protection? But now we've even advanced in our questions. Okay, so let's get into our presentation. Today's theme clearly is your role as a data protection officer being a strategic advisor. How do you balance compliance, risk, and business needs? Now, if you work in an organization, you've also had instances where different business departments hardly want to interact with you. By show of hands, do you experience that? Do you sometimes feel like business is sort of holding back from engaging with you? Or they're a bit weary about the advice you're giving, and sometimes they're not very comfortable, or they feel they do not want to get out of their comforts, or they feel like you're derailing business for the sort of advice that you give. Do you guys feel like that sometimes? Or you're pushing for your opinion or compliance assessment to be accepted, or the recommendations that you're giving? So, can continue? So in a world that we are operating, where we know within your role, you're supposed to ensure that compliance is happening, because we need compliance to happen. We need compliance to happen. We need to make sure that the rules and the regulations that are put in place within the data protection guidance laws are actually followed by the organization. But then also, you want to make sure that as a business, you're making money, because most businesses are there for that purpose. They are just not there for charity work. So you want to make sure that you're making business. So if you focus on one thing, you're just focusing on compliance of what it should be. This is what we need to focus on. This is what we need to get done. Then sometimes it may defeat the purpose of the business. Also, if you're the sort that is choosing to just focus on business and pursue revenue without necessarily observing the rules and the regulations, then you're likely to fall into trouble by certain risks getting materialized, and you face particular issues. For instance, financial risks, reputational risks, and the like. So as a DPO, and also as put by Adrian, we see that your role clearly is a risk and compliance function. Section 6 has put out, it's very clear, it's saying you must make sure that your organization is compliant to the different requirements of the law. We also see that your role as a data protection officer is, you're protecting the organization from legal, financial, and reputational harm. And I think we know this. If the number of records you're having, there is a breach, and people's data privacy rights are abused by that breach, it means the potential of one person or a couple of people taking you to court is high. And also, many times, this comes with fines, whether from the regulator or compensation for different entities, and you would have a financial loss. And also reputational harm. People will not trust you again. It may be hard for people to trust you again. So as a data protection officer, as you play the role of risk, compliance function, this is what you're helping the company do. I think we've covered that bit of ensuring lawful, fair, and responsible use of personal data, leading to number 2. You can continue. Okay. So again, speaking to a clear justification of your role as a data protection officer, we see, originally we saw that personal data protection office or regulators around the world, in this case, I'll even speak about Bank of Uganda. If you have particular statutes, if you have particular laws or guidelines you're looking at from Bank of Uganda, you will realize that there are a lot of consent requirements. A lot of consent requirements and other elements to do with personal data protection. So the pressure to have a data protection officer or someone that is overseeing personal data protection matters has been high, and it has been expanding. But I would say primarily this has been the traditional role or the expectation or the justification to say Bank X is having a data protection officer clearly because the law requires them to do so, or we have a list of things that we need to check. But then over and above that, we notice that there are other things that are happening within businesses. We see that most of your businesses are data-driven business models that have high risk exposure, right? And also within your businesses, we see that trust has become an asset. With all this social media, just a simple tweet on X of, someone's data having been breached can ruin your organization, and the revenue that you could lose can be so high. So the justifications for you to play your role in detail has put up, has expounded over and above the data protection office saying you need to have a data protection officer. We realize that our businesses to survive and for us to be able to make revenue and to continue having those jobs, we need to make sure that we actually have data protection implementation systems and that our organizations are complying and we are able to mitigate the risks. Let's continue. Stefan has spoken about understanding risk management, so we can just go ahead. I just put a brief summary of that, but we can get to compliance. Next slide, please. Okay, so compliance is quite straightforward, and I'm sure many of you understand this. You have requirements, 1, 2, 3, 4, requiring you to do things. How does your organization implement those requirements, whether external or internal? External, you have the core and secondary legislation. Then for internal, you have your policies and procedures, and you're trying to drive implementation and adherence to ensure that you do not get the things that you see in the last box, being penalties, sanctions, and reputational damage. As we continue, so understanding what risk is, what compliance is, then the question would be, what are business needs? Usually when we say business needs, many people always think revenue. But I'll take you back to the categories of departments that Stefan put down. So you have different departments within your organization. And then these departments, everyone has a need. So as a data protection office, you'll be talking to front desk to make sure that they are handling all the visitors' information that they've, when someone comes, the visitors, the book where they sign in or somewhere where they register, registration information. You're trying to talk to them on how that should be done. But then front desk has other ideas. Probably they don't have time for that, and they have other ways they would want to deal with that. Question is, that's their need as a business, that's their need as a business function. Is it in line with the requirements of the law? Or IT wants to keep data beyond the retention periods. Why? Because they want a bit of backup in the future. Or they want to have shortcuts to save money by getting systems that are not foolproof in terms of security, because they want to save somewhat, some money. Or sales department, and commonly, they want a contract signed ASAP, not even a contract. They just want the deal to happen. Let's send an email. and IT can go ahead and give them the information, then we can make the money. So you, as compliance, you're looking at the law that requires all these things to make sure that you're protected from risk, but then the different business departments are thinking otherwise. Or they want to save some money, or they want to move very fast, and that's how business needs come in. All management wants to make a certain quick decision, and they think compliance is going to deter that. Data protection requirements are going to slow down the process, or block them from the business opportunity. Now, looking at the three, risk, compliance, and the business needs, how can we get a balance to make sure that your organizations are being compliant, you're managing risk, but then they're also able to move in terms of the rationale as to why they exist? Just continue. I think we can leave that. Okay. So for many data protection officers, and I'm sure some of the things you whispered, unless if I'm wrong, this must have been one of the challenges or the dilemma. Things that I've spoken about. A business need versus a regulatory requirement. You want a certain product to come out that is going to make use of people's personal data, maybe on the phone, but the law is saying you need a legal basis. You do not have a contract, you do not have the consent, or any of the other legal basis for you to process that data. And you're saying, but we have everything. Why can't we go ahead? So you have that business speed versus regulatory requirements, innovation versus risk controls, commercial pressure versus independent advice. So that's the dilemma. Having requirements of compliance, the risks that you've identified, but then you have business having all these needs, all things that have come up that are sort of challenging the status quo of compliance. How do you overcome that dilemma? So we can continue. Okay, so for organizations, of course, to be flexible and not remain rigid, and for you to move forward, being competitive, addressing innovation, you need to see how you strike a balance. You cannot only be pushing for 1 + 1 = 2. Of course, I'm not saying you break the law. We shall get to see how you can get to strike the balance. So we noticed that compliance is without risk thinking creates blind spots. That is something that you need to you need to look out for. So you cannot just focus on compliance. Compliance alone is not enough. Stefan talked about risk-based approach. So risk-based thinking supports smarter defensive decisions. And then business objectives, as you can see, must remain achievable. They are only sustainable when risks are understood and managed. So you as data protection officers, you must be able to appreciate, as we shall see in detail, some of the tips that you need to have to make sure that you're actually striking that balance. And now that's how you being a strategic advisor comes in. So for many people, when they're employed, they think, I come in the morning, they ask me for an opinion, I'll do an opinion, I give them the opinion according to just the way the law is. Now, we are not thinking out of that. We are not thinking out of the box. We are not thinking out of the box. We are speaking a lot of legalese. We are advising the board and management in language that cannot be understood. And sometimes we don't even understand what the requirements of data protection are, or even the data sets that we have and the data processes that we have in place. So how can you get to be a strategic advisor if you don't understand those things? The key to have the balance is to understand that you are of importance. If you've not been told that data protection officers are of importance, I'm telling you now, because most of the work you do saves the organizations that you work for from a lot of risks materializing, which would sometimes even put many of these organizations to death, or some may take some time to recover from the loss. So it's important that you see yourselves as strategic advisors. Just help me go down. I think I have that slide. Just run through it. So as you'll see, so you need to take your role very seriously because, like I've said, you advise management on compliance matters, risk mitigations, and recommendations, preserving the business revenue and integrity, right? And then you do translate legal and regulatory risk into practical business impact. Some risks, like we know, are opportunities, right? If you're able to identify certain risks and you see an opportunity, you're the same person to advise. And that can be turned into a business opportunity. Then you enable informed risk-based decision making, and you act as a trusted link between your organization and regulators. Then you also support management and the board in embedding privacy into corporate strategy, product design, and enterprise risk management. Like, the role you play is very huge. Before you sign off, that product that they are trying to roll out cannot go out. If you have a product, and I'm sure many of you have had this, a product is going to be rolled out, they'll come to you. Or sometimes if they don't come to you, next thing you see, there is an issue that has been raised or an alarm, and then it comes back to you. And then you're the same people working between, you're like the intermediate between your organization, data protection office, and your regulators. For instance, Insurance Regulatory Authority, Bank of Uganda. And you handling that affair is already something that puts you in a position of being a strategic employee or officer. So it's important that you take note of those. And that I think needs to awaken your approach to the work that you do, because it's not just something that you're, just getting through your job. There is responsibility that comes with that kind of role and accountability as a data protection officer. Okay, we can continue. So some of the tips to ensure that, yes, whereas you're identifying those risks, you're pushing for compliance within the data protection requirements, how do you ensure that there is that balance with the needs that business has? So we work for organizations, but we don't understand what the organizations are all about. Like, we don't understand the business models, we don't understand the strategy. So if you don't understand where you're going with the organization, then how do you put yourself in the shoes of the businessman? You understand, guys? Huh? So it's important that you get to understand the business model and the strategy. Understand the legal and compliance requirements. The detail of the compliance requirements, of course, entails the detail that Stefan talked about. Now, the nitty-gritty of you being able to do your work diligently. What is the data that you have? Of that data, what's personal data? And what are the processes within the organizations, in the organization where you're processing personal data? You will not be able to be a strategic advisor if you do not understand these things. So if it means that you go for training, go for that training. Let your organization understand that you're a strategic officer. If you must attend the PDPO trainings that happen, please do have those. Then also you must have stakeholder management skills. Imagine you're trying to manage IT, you're trying to manage HR, as opposed to you being the victim of everyone. This new project, everyone thinks I'm the villain. You should be the one to bring everyone together to an understanding. So you must know, how do you handle the regulator in terms of regulatory affairs? How do you manage the board? How do you manage management and the staff? You have to have the stakeholder management skills, because for you to be able to strike that balance is going to need tactic. It's going to need tactic, and you must develop these skills. Then also business acumen. You need to wear the business acumen hat, have tactic, and have a proactive approach. Don't just sit back and wait for emails to drop with a complaint. Just again, when I was speaking, I said, think out of the box. Sometimes you will get into the mind of the other department head. You will see sometimes the pains that they have because they think you're blocking. You're blocking whatever initiative that they have, or a certain process that has been in place. So you must, I don't know whether I will use the word empathetic, but you must get into the other person's head. Then you must have that business acumen and see how you can get tactical about a situation, and without necessarily have to break the law, how you come up with recommendations that can get management to appreciate either your position or how the organization can best do what without necessarily having to break the law. Then also we spoke earlier about clear communication. So your communication must be clear. Not you're advising management, this is what we need to do. You're trying to make them see your point, but you're communicating in a language that they clearly don't get. You're speaking legalese, you're speaking certain terms, and if you're trying to get people on your side to appreciate, but they cannot understand the language you're speaking, then it's going to be hard for you to have a meeting point or a balance between your role and the business departments. Then also, sometimes we are doing trainings for the sake of doing trainings. Customize your trainings. If you are a bank, customize your trainings to banking, data protection, or processing areas. And then collaborate. Again, the previous speakers have spoken about collaboration. You cannot do that. You cannot do that work in isolation. You just can't. Because for everything that is required within the law, over and above you implementing for your department, you must ensure that every other department is implementing what they should do. Now you need to know how you collaborate with this, and these are just internal stakeholders. But then you also have external stakeholders. For instance, you'll have third-party organizations that you're processing data with. You will have regulators that you're engaging with. Are you collaborating with them? Can you pick up your phone and call someone from Data Protection Office to clearly understand? Or, for you, this is what I think, we'll go with this. So you need to have the spirit of collaboration. If you think there is a proposal that is being done, let's say processing data out of Uganda, and you think you need clarification, collaborate with your colleagues in other banks. Give them a call. I heard you guys store data in Kenya. How did you go about it? I've seen the law says ABCD. Call Data Protection Office to understand, all right? So it's important that you collaborate and have active stakeholder engagement. And then also it's important that when an organization is starting a project, for instance, they're coming up with a phone app that is going to do ABCD, as opposed to you coming at the end chain. It's important that management and the people you deal with get to a culture of appreciating that they need to engage you at the starting point as opposed to at the end point, or when they've already executed and things have become bad, now that they are running to you. So you need to build that culture within your organization. Then also, I think I spoke about this, having controls that are proportionate and practical. Sometimes we are sticking to the letter and we are not thinking about the practicalities of an organization. You're suggesting software. For instance, you're dealing, I don't know what best example to give, but let's say you're dealing with consumers that are illiterate, but the software you're proposing for certain things, they will not be able to consume it or make use of it. and it's going to be very costly for the organization. So how do you go about this? You need to come up with proportionate and practical controls. Then sometimes we are making decisions not based on information. So if I'm going to walk up to my MD and I'm trying to convince him that if we do ABCD, this is what it's likely to get us to. Have statistics, have examples. You know, it needs to be an informed decision, not just sometimes emotional and the like. Then also you need to document, track your value, and have accountability reporting. And I think this often energizes many people because over time, the organization also gets to appreciate you as a strategic advisor and someone who is helping them overcome those risks. Let's run through the other slides because I'm sure people are hungry now. So just to get into the detail of, you know, doing that and seeing the major challenges usually that are faced, how do you support innovation and efficiency? You know, push privacy by design and not by default. You're coming up, IT is coming up with a system, and the system is not taking into account the data protection requirements. So as opposed to just rolling out that system the way it is, from the beginning, let your system take into account privacy requirements. That way, also IT doesn't feel like they're inconvenienced, you know, with these requirements. And then automation and technology-enabled compliance. I think that's also straightforward. And then have streamlined processes that enable growth within your organization. Just make sure that people are not surprised by some of your compliance requirements. Have you documented down? Have you told them that before you start a project, please, I'm the first person, me and legal, we are the first people you go to. Don't surprise people and say you ought to have come to me first, but you don't have it in your compliance or data protection policy and procedure. Document, have streamlined processes that also enable growth. Let's continue. Just on the first part, innovation, and another point is usually compliance, data protection requirements. Some of the requirements that you need may sound expensive, and management or your organization is not willing to invest. So your approach needs to be well thought out in terms of any software, for instance, that you want, or an application that will support you in your role as you work with other departments. Then also, usually the challenge you'll face when you're trying to balance is managing competing interests. So you'll find that HR on the same project is speaking a different language. IT, legal, board, everyone is speaking a different language. How do you bring everyone in one place to show that it's actually, we are all aiming for the same thing? We are trying to make money, right? Or we are trying to impact this community. So you need to drive that message. Like the shared objectives need to be very clear so that the message, the different entities that you're dealing with are able to appreciate. Then you'll find that sometimes people are just confused or they do not appreciate. And that brings in an element of dilemma or competing interests with the people that you're dealing with. Still, it goes back to your engagement and being able to facilitate among the different parties. And then sometimes we lack transparency. You'll find that there are risks that we've identified, but you're not being very transparent. Instead of engaging the head of IT, you're already running to the MD, and you're not communicating very well. So it's important that for any engagements that are happening in the organization, you clearly have transparency with the different owners, process owners. We can continue. The other thing, I think one of the hugest things is culture in the organizations we are working with. If people don't appreciate data protection, you have a huge, huge problem. Because you'll keep preaching, you'll keep speaking to this manager, you'll keep speaking to the staff, but people never appreciate. So you need to see how you promote this culture. There are different things I've put there. So we've seen behavior and culture drive real outcomes. Integrity must be lived, not just documented. So you have policies on your shelf, but then what? then what? What's happening there? Sometimes the data protection officers, we are the first people to be non-compliant. And then I think for you to achieve the culture is your continuous engagement with people and the training. But the training should just not be training. Let it be customized. So people will be able to appreciate. If I'm dealing with credit reference bureaus, let it be customized to CRB information. Let it be customized to credit reports. And also make it departmental. If it's credit reference bureau, what does the legal department need to know? What does the IT department need to know? It means then I have to comb through the policies and procedures and the laws that affect IT. I need to get the requirements, Income Tax Act, whatever it is for the finance department. I'm personalizing it. Employment Act, a template of our employment contract for HR. Let it be personalized. That way someone is able to appreciate. These things will not sound alien. Can continue. So about the culture. So once you've, the slide before, once you've built that culture, it becomes very smooth for you to operate with the different business heads or entities to be able to have a meeting of the minds to get a balance between compliance and business needs. People easily understand you and you're able to come up with particular decisions or make decisions with, that are well informed and with clarity. So sometimes, yes, we have the stakeholder expectations. Of course, with the clients, we must push for trust, reputation, ethical conduct. Then the regulators, we must demonstrate sound culture and behavior. And then we must also push for clear values, and we should be good leaders in our organizations. Let's continue. And then in all this, we have the human factor. So yes, you have the policy, it says ABCD, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. Do you guys agree? Do you ever look at some policies and you're like, but what is this? Like, yes, the law requires ABCD, but the practicality of certain procedures internally are not applicable. So how do you come to the human? How do you marry that to the human factor? How flexible are you without breaking the law, and how tactical are you? Then focus on behavior behind the risk. Sometimes you need to understand why are people behaving the way they are behaving in an organization. Why is someone, you know, why does this person always, you know, probably, which example can I give? Sometimes you need to understand why someone is doing a certain activity that probably is exposing you to a risk under data protection to be able to handle the situation. And then, of course, leadership and role modeling matter. What is your board like? What are they doing in terms of the internal stakeholders being the employees? And also you as leaders, how are you driving the culture? How are you engaging with your staff? Are you so far off that you're out of human touch? You're not empathetic, you're not understanding. So these are other things that you need to work on. Basically, the empathetic side of things within your organization to, you know, just make sure that those things are worked on to be able to help you as you pursue a balance between your work and the business needs. Continue, please. And then, as I summarize, so some of the best practices for harmonizing everything, have your integrated risk and compliance frameworks clearly. I think one of the questions people will ask is, but now I'm playing a risk, I'm playing a compliance role. Isn't that contradictory? I think that will be homework to you guys. But if you've noticed in the different departments within your organizations, you will have maybe a risk officer. This risk officer often is receiving different risks as reported by the different departments, right? Meaning each department you're tracking your risks. So at that point, you're in charge of your risks as your compliance department. Not that you're the risk officer for the whole organization, just for the element that you're dealing with. Then also for compliance, it's to the extent of implementing the Data Protection Act and the regulations. Then, yeah, ensure cross-functional collaboration, continuous training and awareness. Let's continue. And as I conclude some of the takeaways, I could say is that you guys, again, I emphasize that you play a strategic role within the businesses. And when you do this balance, people get to trust you. They actually know that it's just not about you being rigid in your compliance, data protection role, but you have the business strategy at heart. You want the business to grow. You want, people to be able to execute those projects, but how it's done. So people can trust you, and this will allow for proper collaboration, accountability, and people taking responsibility. And then, of course, it drives a good culture behavior, and also judgment matters. I think that's it. I don't know if did I leave out anything? Just go down. So I don't know if you have any questions or, something that you'd like to share, and then we can close. Just don't ask very hard questions. I'm very hungry.
Okay, thank you, Among, for your presentation. Just to know, who should handle and report privacy risks to management? Is it a risk officer or a DPO who maintains the privacy risks in the risk register? Or should the privacy risks be included in the risk officer's risk register?
Thank you. Stefan, did you handle that in terms of the reporting lines? But I've spoken about it. I'm going to explain it the best way I understand it from my experience. Somebody else? So as you get that person, I'll just respond to that. So my understanding is many times you have a risk officer, right? Depending on your reporting lines, I don't know, some people, you'll find that they're directly, they do not have a risk officer, but I don't know who would be designated to handle risk. So imagine that each department, as part of their JD, is that as HR, you must identify risks that are keen to your department. Same applies to finance. Come up with mitigations, recommendations. And at the end of the day, within your management meetings, or as management, you're able to make presentations as head of departments or dissect those risks or your risk registers. At the end of the day, everything feeds into one register, which belongs to the risk manager or the risk officer, who then reports to the board. Right? Guys, is the practice different from yours? For those who have that kind of framework. Guys, can you say something? It's the same, okay. So does that answer your question? We shall chat further. Another question, yes.
Thank you so much for such a timely presentation. My name is Irene Namase. I'm the DPO NGO Bureau. I have just a simple question here. How do you prioritize privacy, especially in an environment where there are very limited resources as a DPO? Because all these things we are talking about are good, but some of them are tagged to resources. So I just sort of want to know how best would I be able to prioritize privacy in a setting where resources are very limited and things are not simple financially there. Thank you so much.
Okay, so my answer to you is resources as simple as an Excel. All you need to start off is an Excel. Excel, for purposes of learning, these guys are always training, so maybe at that point it's internet and also doing your personal research to understand the role more. So you can utilize a data protection office, utilize material online, utilize the free workshops that are always happening, and then you have a peer group, which is a data protection officers group. Collaborate with your colleagues, understand. Now that's for the knowledge aspect, where you're practically just doing self-study and you're engaging in facilitations that are happening by the Data Protection Office. Then the other thing is also personal reading and understanding of the law. Have you understood the law that you're dealing with? And then, like I've said, implementation or the implementation project and the like, all you need is an Excel and time. So put down, have your simple things like a checklist where you're having the law, different requirements, forming a checklist, know the responsible party. So for instance, if it's something about no direct marketing, which parties are responsible with the organization? Put them there, have a meeting with them, find out what it is, give them the requirement, and do whatever you have to do. So at that point, what you're having is you're actually putting down the work in an Excel and you're collaborating with other entities. Same applies to training. If there's a training requirement, you've identified it, then you'll go ahead and do whatever you have to do. So I'll say most of the resources that are required for implementation of the data protection requirements are actually hardly costly. It's you putting in the work and the time, right? Now, then when it gets to things like security for IT systems, I think that is something you can always check in with Stefan, but again, also I think there are some particular security checks that are not necessarily that costly. Am I right? So I think you need to understand your organization, where you stand, and things that you can adopt. Very advanced organizations will have software like OneTrust. And also this is because they have large volumes of data, and also their processing activities are very many, they are cross-border. So when they look at the risk, the risk appetite and the like, they're able to invest. And also the money sometimes is there, they will invest in that. So you can also look at that, and also the risk and the availability of resources. But I also know many organizations actually don't have that software. Most of the work they're doing, they're tracking from their Excel documents and the like. And of course, conversations and meetings and trainings. Yes. Yes, go on.
My name is Chirunda, and I'm a DPO of an organization in Jinja called Christians. My concern is on privacy by design. For the people who created the ATM, they came up with an idea of privacy by putting a password or a passcode when you are withdrawing your money. But in this era that we are in right now, there are so many criminals that they will create the same replica of the same ATM keyboard. They will come with it, put it on the ATM, on the machine. So everyone that will come will type in the PIN. At the end of the day, these criminals will come back in the evening. They will remove their replica with all the information of all the clients, and they will come back and withdraw the money of the clients. So, with this, who is liable for the breach? Is it the client or the bank itself?
Thank you. I think that will be taken on by Stefan. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Thank you so much for the insightful session. My name is Pierre Massey. I work for Bank of Baroda Uganda Limited. My issue is about sharing of personal data outside Uganda. You realize that most banks, okay, I'll talk about Bank of Baroda. We have parent banks. For example, we have Bank of Baroda India, whereby we share this information with them, like abroad or even with other territories or subsidiaries. So my concern is, how risky is it to the bank to share that information, and how best can we mitigate those risks associated with sharing information outside Uganda. Thank you.
I'll also refer that question to the Data Protection Office. I could respond, but I don't want to usurp authority. Anyone else? Okay. One more question here.
Thank you, Anita. My name is Noro, and I work with Ugandre.
You work with who?
Noro.
No, you work with who?
Uganda Insurance Company.
Okay.
My question is about data breach. In incidents where we can have data breach, I would like you to advise maybe my primary role as a DPO and how it can be handled.
Okay. Thank you. Does someone have a copy of the Data Protection Act? Because that is clearly spelled out. The moment you get to discover that there is a breach, what you get to do. So if anyone can just help me look up the section and the regulations. So they give process that you need to follow. Once you've discovered that there's been a breach, of course, you're supposed to report to the Data Protection Office, etc., etc. But all this, you can also add more reasonable steps as an organization to minimize reputational risk. Okay, so there are two questions to Stephen and maybe Becca. Please help me address those.
Thank you. I will respond to the issue raised around the ATM. And I will directly say the bank is not going to have blame because they've done their best. You're going to be blamed. In security, we have what we call multi-factor authentication mechanisms. And in this case, we are using two mechanisms. That is what you have and what you know. Without those two, I cannot withdraw money from your account over the ATM machine. So the bank is giving you a physical ATM card and also setting for you a PIN. Now, the wrongdoer is going to come and pick the PIN, but they are not picking your ATM card. So they cannot complete any transaction without the card. So they only have the PIN. So the bank has provided you with that level of security. Now, if they go ahead, pick the PIN and also find you along the way, grab you and take the ATM card, it's now not a bank issue, but it is a police case.
With us to learn how do we answer some of the questions that you have come up with, and also help us think through some of the real situations that occur in our work. So I invite you to come back after lunch and we'll be able to give you one-on-one and practical solutions to protect your data. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for that communication. And like he has ably mentioned, please feel free to visit the clinic right outside this event hall for any more clarity on a number of issues to do with cybersecurity and data protection. I'd like to invite Miss Anita Hayward to come and give us the key takeaways from today's event, and then we'll be in position to conclude the session with a session where we'll be giving out certificates to the different participants. You're welcome.
Okay. A very good afternoon. My name is Anita Ahewa, as introduced. I know I'm standing in the middle of you and your lunch, standing between you and your lunch. So I'm going to be very brief. So I'm here to just give us the takeaways from today's workshop. which was basically about, just to wrap it up, it was about the DPO as a strategic advisor, balancing compliance, risk, and business needs. Now, I'm not going to go through the different presentations we had. I'm going to just summarize what was key in what we had. So some of the key takeaways are that, one, we need to have refresher awareness trainings for staff as DPOs. And then there is need to do data mapping. Data mapping was one of the key things that was talked about, and records of processing activities, because if you don't know the kind of data your organization has as a DPO, you cannot guide on the safeguards. And then still on data mapping, we said it's important because as the DPO, it helps you to know where to put your effort, and we cannot run privacy independently. We have to work together to ensure we drive compliance. The other key takeaways is that understanding processing activities is important because it enables us to prioritize as DPOs and as compliance officers or whatever we are in our different works. And then another key takeaway was that it is important that as a DPO, you join the risk management team and provide guidance on risk management. It is also important to keep a record of processing records so that they are accessed by the right people within the organization. So if you're working on those records, please do not go with them when you leave the organization. And then another key thing that came up was that the DPO is a key risk and compliance function. And as a DPO, your role is a risk and compliance function. Therefore, you must make sure your entity complies with the Data Protection and Privacy Act. Another thing on the DPO role is that your role as a DPO is to save your entity from reputational, legal, and any financial risks that may arise. And another key takeaway that we may need to not miss, you must have stakeholder management skills. That was a key thing that came up in about 2 of our presentations, because this helps you to strike a balance between risk, compliance, and business needs. And then communication was another key thing that came up, I think, in all the 3 presentations. Communication must be clear. And then I'll end with this. We need to customize our trainings, because I remember the first takeaway was on training, so we need to customize trainings according to our sectors so that we are not just training for the sake of it. For the other takeaways, we'll be able to share information on this, because I know I had just a few minutes, Jordan. Maybe to conclude, the key takeaway really was that compliance alone is not enough. Effective data protection goes beyond compliance. DPOs need to be involved in decision-making, equipped to apply a risk-based approach so that they are able to guide organizations on how to balance legal obligations with their business needs. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful lunch.
Thank you, Anita, for that presentation. Allow me to invite Ms. Gloria Nasuna to come and give the closing remarks. Ms. Gloria Nasuna is from the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, which is our mother ministry. Please, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Data Privacy Day. Happy Data Privacy Day. Hope you're having fun, though you look tired, but you should celebrate yourselves. This is your day. So my name is Gloria Nasuna. I'm coming from the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance. And data privacy is very key to the ministry as it's part of the pillars in the digital transformation roadmap. So we appreciate your involvement, and we appreciate for your response to come and celebrate this day here, but not only that, to come and be part of this master's class. So on behalf of the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, I commend the PDPO and the partners, including CIPESA. You've done a very phenomenal job for convening this timely master's class. So today has reaffirmed that data protection is not only about online systems. It covers physical records, physical assessments, and as Adrian talked about, could even involve eavesdropping, like you hear a phone call that you're not meant to hear, CCTVs, and day-to-day organizational practices. You all know what sectors you're coming from. So strong privacy governance is therefore essential to sustaining trust in Uganda's digital transformation. To all the PDPOs here and those who online and go out since now your masters and spread the word, we encourage leadership early and apply for risk-based approaches in all your setups of all the organizations, and also ensure compliance that not only just supports the service delivery, but also does not hinder the innovations for the practices you do. So thank you and congratulations for these masters. Clap for yourselves. You're now masters in the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gloria Nasuna, for the closing remarks. And like she ably mentioned that you're now masters, and there's only one way you can prove that you're masters. At least the first way you can prove that is by showing a certificate of qualification. So at this juncture, we'll be going to our last segment of today's session, where we'll have the certificates given out to the different participants. I'll be reading out your names, and then I'll also invite the National Director to kindly come and officiate this ceremony. Okay, so we'll begin with Mr. Sean Wajira. Mr. Sean Wajira, please. Next in line, we'll be having Mr. Chirunda Ali. Please prepare to come. Then we'll be having Mr. Hilary Randeche. Apologies if I get some of the names wrong. Mr. Mark Muganga, you can be preparing to come as well. Can we have Mr. Joseph Kasozi as well? Mr. Justice Ashaba, you should be on your way too. Can we have Mr. Farouk Kafero as well? Mr. David Seranga, please make your way to the front. Then we have Donatine Nyongendaro. Okay, this one is a bit, I don't know if it's a he or she and if they're still around. Then Mr. Stephen Kisira. Can we have Magambo Emmanuel? Then Miss Matovu Shifa. Miss Edna Kasozi. Miss Namtebi Fatuma. Miss Patricia Ainembabazi. Miss Elizabeth Zipporah Akol. Miss Anita Hewa. Miss Gloria Atuheire. Miss Rachel Ayebaziwe. Mr. Enos Yamukama. Miss Ayo Rachel Maria. Mr. William Tinyemfuza. Mr. Norman Kushaba. Mpamulunji Nulu. Miss Rona Nwakunda. Miss Kauvani Veronica. Mr. Kasozi Farouk. Miss Gloria Nasuna. Miss Immaculate Nalubega. Miss Thelma Nyakecho. Thelma, please. Miss Deborah Agumenator. Mr. Christopher Lugomvu. Miss Shallow Natukunda, sorry. Miss Alice Aparo. Miss Irene Namwase. Miss Laura Chomugisha. Mr. Gilbert Setuma. Mr. Edmond Epongu. Mr. Nasa Koyoyo. Miss Mercy Ampere, Mr. Albert Mario Obuapas, Miss Felista Tumusime, Miss Kia Damali, Mr. Fred Drapari, Miss Naume Akutaze, Miss Muwaya Verity, Miss Fatuma Namtebi, do we have Mr. Edmond Pongo in the room? Yeah, I think that's it for the certificates. In case you've not received yours, kindly approach me. We'll be in position to issue with one. Thank you so much. And at this juncture, I would like to invite you for a photo moment. It's the last item of today's event before you can go in for your lunch. I want to believe all of us have received coupons. In case you have not, please kindly reach out. We'll be in position to issue with one, but please let's come to the front for the photo moment. You may need accountability on where you were for the day. So if you show them a photo, you can enjoy your lunch. Lunch is being served at the marketplace. Feel free to interact with the different DPOs. You may learn a thing or two. And thank you so much for attending today's event. We look forward to having you next year as well.